4 miles.
We use their head every time when they got a food trip over.
Okay, here we go, people. I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, July 9th, 2018, and the time is 7:00 p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were just a couple of items in the table file.
Yes, you had some additions to the consent agenda, including some appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment, one resignation, and a leave of absence. And then in addition, you also have a copy of the Thought Exchange Facilities Report of the recently completed survey of the community. And that was just made available this afternoon, so
Okay,
it's in the deal
excellent.
file.
Thank you very much. If there's no objections, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay. If you'd like to come forward, I just wanted to, couple of stipulations around public comment that I'll read quickly, and we ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. So I'd like to remind the public that this is a listening opportunity for the board and not an opportunity or a time to debate an issue. Also, the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act prohibits comments about specific student matters, even without naming the student in open session. This includes the public comment portion of our meeting. The board respects and values your input on student matters, but when it relates to a specific student or to a specific student matter, such input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, such as building principal and superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. So we ask that you step to the podium, identify yourself by stating your name and address, and if you represent a group. And again, if you can limit your remarks to 3 minutes, that would be great. And so, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Rhonda Pownell. I'm the mayor of Northfield, but not here necessarily representing the city council. I'm here of my own will. My address is 1300 Canyon Valley Drive, so I'm obviously a resident of Northfield because I am the mayor of Northfield. It's a pleasure to be standing before you here tonight. I just said to Matt and Julie before the meeting started, this is my first official school board meeting, right? Usually I'm doing official duties for elsewhere. And so I just really wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you for your service. I know you have some difficult decisions before you, as you always do, right? You're busy going about doing the good of the city for our public school system, not only for now, but for in the future, for children, kids, families that aren't even here yet. And school board members have done that for many years, long before any of us were ever here in Northfield. So I just really want to say thank you for your service and thank you for your due diligence that you're doing on the facilities study, and even in the level at which that you are going out and seeking input from people in our community. I really applaud you because I know that you've done a significant amount of engagement with the public through Thought Exchange. I saw it through the last referendum process where you brought that forward, and I know that you're out there and you care about the public opinion. So I think you're doing an excellent job, and I really appreciate that you're willing to make difficult decisions for the long-term health and betterment of our community. They're not always easy decisions to make, but we're not here to do what's easy nor what's comfortable. We are here to really think long range for our community and what will be best for our community over the long haul, not just for now. And I applaud your courage and your willingness to tackle these issues. And I look forward to what you'll bring forward for our community with regards to the facility study. And I just wanted to let you know that I support you. I support your work. And I thank you for your service. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on. I understand from Dr. Hillman we don't have any formal announcements and recognitions unless there's anything board members would like to add. Okay, so we'll move on then for our first item for discussion, which on the agenda you will note is the ALC Continuous School Improvement Plan presentation, and we welcome Area Learning Center Director Daryl Keller.
Hello. Hello again.
Hi.
So I am the director, as I was introduced. This is the school improvement plan for the 2018-19 school year.
I think this is the first one of the year, if I'm not mistaken.
You are the leadoff batter.
Hopefully I go
No
strong.
pressure.
No pressure. All right. Clicker, is there a clicker?
There's
Use the arrow on the keyboard to your left.
All right. So ALC strives to support all the students in reaching successful graduation. So the four main areas that we focus on: attendance, credit completion, post-secondary plans, and then the community, the ALC community, Northfield community, and the greater community at large. So the ALC, our community in the building, in the city limits, and beyond as well. So we do different things like service learning projects and things like that for that community piece. So this is a little bit, it's getting a little more and more difficult to read with the graphs each year as we compile them from year to year. But I'll kind of give you the gist. It's a little bit further away than it has been in the past, but I'll try my best to walk you through it. So the goals of the 17-18 school year, the first one was our attendance related goal. So that was, we wanted to have 60% of the students at that no attendance penalties benchmark. Goal number 2 was of the total attempted credits, we wanted a 5% increase from the years prior, that same grading period. And then goal number 3 is graduating seniors will have a post-secondary life plan. And so what those 3 are, the top one there, the top graph, you'll see is our 85% attendance records. And as I said, it's a little bit tough to read, but the green is this current past year. And as you'll notice, in years past, I have remarked on the roller coaster that we kind of have the same highs, the same lows, and it kind of goes throughout the year that way. This past year we had kind of more of a parabola. For the mathematicians, it was much more of a bowl shape. So we started off high, got a little bit low, and then it went back high. So the mid-year grading periods 4 and 5 it was kind of the dip, but it went back up and stayed back up and just kept going up. So it was a little bit different this year than it has been in years past. One of the things, and overall the attendance was a little higher than it has been in the past. Hopefully, one of our coincidences, but hopefully it wasn't a coincidence, is we started our advisory period last year. So we did the social emotional learning each week and hit on those topics. Some of those were self-control, responsible decision-making, things like that, of getting students to school on time and kind of making that decision to get there and be there present. And so hopefully that did impact our attendance, because that was coincidentally when we first started that advisory period, and our attendance did take an upward swing. So that was good. So we're going to, for the next year, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but for the next year we're going to continue with that advisory period because it did seem to have some promising results. So that was one of the noticeable trends on the reflection of the narrative piece. The bottom chart there has the credits for the previous years, and that one also is a little tougher to read. But the green is also last year's, and if you notice, the attendance has an uptick, the credits has a downtick. So people were coming there, but they just weren't completing work, or they weren't there quite enough to get the credit for the class. So our credits suffered last year, whereas our attendance increased. So it's an interesting dynamic that we're going to power through here when we get back together. We started to, at the end of the school year, through our PLCs and things, to digest what exactly that means, but we're going to continue that conversation when we get back together. And then our goal number 3, we had all graduating seniors have a life plan. And so we were able to poll or interview. We have an exit interview for all of our graduating seniors. So we were able to complete that, and I just listed what their plans were. So we had 28. We had the largest class of graduates that we've had since I've been in the position. So we had 28 that were planning on going right into the workforce. 4 of them were enrolled or are currently enrolling in a 2-year program, and 1 was deployed in June 14th. So 1 was in the military. So we had a really large percentage that were going to do that, either work right away, work for a little bit, save up, go to college eventually. That was by far the majority of our graduating seniors. So key reflections, some of these things I've hit on already. A couple unique trends. It was more of a bowl shape than the traditional roller coaster shape that it has been in the past for attendance. Credits earned overall was down. So this coming up year in the springtime, we kind of digested that, and that's one of our goals for this upcoming year is that we're going to really, now that we got the attendance on the right track, we're going to try and figure out that what are we going to do for the credit piece of that to try and get both of them on the upward trend. 100% of credit earned was really good, but the 0% of credit earned was higher than previous years. So there's quite a few stats that I don't put on here that we just look through as a staff. One of those is we keep track of how many students get 100% of their credits that they're trying for each grading period, and how many get 0% of their credits that they're trying for each grading period, just to see the entire picture, not just bits of it. And so the 100% of credits earned was pretty good. It was very comparable to previous years. There was quite a few people getting 100% of their credits that they were going for. But unfortunately, the 0% of credits earned was higher than in the past, where they would get through a grading period and didn't get any credit at all. One of my big goals in talking to students is we got to make progress. Even if it's partial credits, let's try and work something out to get some credits instead of 0 credits. So that's something we're going to definitely be working on too. The advisory does help quite a bit with that. We had a lot of comments from staff and from students that they really like. We do the social emotional learning, but then one advisory period each grading period, we look at credits and attendance. And so we say, where are you at credit-wise? Where are you at attendance-wise? Where have you been? And so we really get the students aware of where they are with their credits. That's helped quite a bit. And so we're going to do more of that with that 0% credits, because students, like everyone, they want to see some progress. And so we want to make those goals to say, okay, let's make some progress. What can we do to get some credit, if not all the credit? Some of the main interventions implemented: social emotional learning. We did that 24 topics throughout the year. We were also, coincidentally, because of that social emotional learning through our advisory, we won the 2018 Promising Practice Award. So that was pretty exciting to go up to Science Museum and accept that award. So that was pretty cool. Alternative attendance policy. So we had the let's try and salvage instead of absent and out and don't come back. Stay here. Let's try and figure out how we can get some credit. So we've been experimenting with that as well. We did a lot of field trips, a lot of activities. We try and do some educational and some community building field trips. So we went to the zoo, we went to the Science Museum, we went to Valley Fair again, our annual Valley Fair trip. So a lot of fun last year with those activities as well. And then we continue with the PBIS, the positive behavioral interventions to create that positive atmosphere at the ALC. So these are, as the first slide indicated, these are our continual goals. We have these goals that rise to the top every year, because if they're there, if they're attending, and if they're working, they're most likely going to get their credits and they're going to make progress towards that graduation, which is our end goal. And so our goals are very similar year to year. The first one, that attendance; the second one, credits attempted; and then the third, that life, post-secondary life plan, we found to be pretty valuable. Getting that exit interview with seniors, and exit is, we're not asking them on the last day, we're asking them earlier than the last day so we can help them remove barriers if there is something in their life plan that they want to do. So we do everything from helping fill out FAFSA to helping find daycare for kind of that next step. So there's a lot of different things that we try and remove those barriers for students so that when they do graduate, they have this plan kind of laid out for them and they just can kind of walk through that. So we're going to continue doing that because it's been a pretty positive step in the right direction. So strategies and assessments. These are some of the things we're going to continue the advisory period, although we're going to tweak it slightly because we're going to continue the social emotional learning, but we're going to add some career and college topics in there. As the high school is doing some career and college readiness type things, we're going to implement some of those as well. And a lot of them do overlap with the social emotional learning, so it's not kind of a round peg, square hole kind of thing. a lot of that will flow pretty naturally. And then we're going to continue with the credits and attendance through our advisory period to really make sure students know where they're at and what goals we can work on to make that progress. PLC, we're going to continue our implementation strategies, and the ESSA as well is coming into play. And so for us, it's a good thing that we're on the list, in my opinion, because it means that we're getting the students that we're supposed to get. So the students.
So let's take a pause for a moment just to say what ESSA is. ESSA is the Every Student Succeeds Act, and so it's part of the new state accountability system. It's called the North Star Accountability System. There's a target that is set at the state level. The list has not officially come out yet because they will not be announcing schools that have been identified for support. We call it naughty list, right? Now it's the support list, and they actually are providing some support in a better way than we've seen in some time. Every area learning center in the state is on the list. And because remember that one of the key things, and we'll do a presentation on ESSA sometime in August or September, is I think they might actually finally be done with getting the things in order. But one of the criteria is attendance. And so every single area learning center in the state is on the list for support, because as you know, one of the big issues that every area learning center struggles through is student attendance. And so we also know, and I think I was pretty candid, is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah, yes,
with our folks that they can teach us, they can give us support in teaching science, that's great. But what most of our area learning students need is support in social work, some mental health pieces. I asked if they could supply a social worker for us. That's not in the budget, as you might imagine. But what we know, and they understand, they've been very gracious about it, and we've talked with the department, I've given them the feedback. And I think the key thing is the state does know that the way that they agreed to the North Star assessment system, it by default puts every area learning center in the state on the list for support.
Yeah, they have a 4-year graduation rate that they use as one of the determining factors. And one of our criteria is if you're behind in graduating on time. So it kind of stands to reason that the students that are not on track for 4 years come to the ALC. So, then we have this dilemma. But the good thing that we are with all this is that we are now keeping a closer look on our 5, 6, and 7-year rates. And so if they don't graduate in 4 years, or they're graduating in 5, 6, or 7 years, that's the goal, is to graduate the students. And so it's helped kind of broaden that perspective too. So at some point, especially if you're interested, I can share with our 4, 5, 6, 7-year rates of graduation for the ALC, because it does go up considerably for 5-year, 6-year, and even 7 years graduation rates. So yeah, that is in play, but it's still kind of in flux as they're kind of figuring out kind of what they're going to do. So we will have support staff, so we have a part-time social worker, part-time psychologist, Promise Fellow position, chemical dependency counselor. We're trying lots of different things, and we have a new piece this year as well. We're partnering up with the Key, and so the Key has a couple full-time staff that they've added. We're gonna partner up with them for students that attend both places, so we can work with them kind of where they're at and meet them where they're at. So that's another piece that we're going to try to help remove those barriers for success of graduation. And that's the last one there, partnership with the Key as we move forward. And then for assessment, we're going to continue our data tracking. So you'll see my graph. I'll probably get to a point where I'll split it out because I've been keeping it now for several years, just so it's a little easier to read for this presentation, but we'll continue with all that. So just this is kind of a symbolic last question slide, because as you see, the one on the far left, we have some students in science class. They were dissecting, I can't remember exactly what they're, parasitic worms, where they can dissect them in half and then they multiply. Can't remember what the exact worms are. Yeah, something like that. And then on the far right, we had a new robotics class that they were building robots and programming them things like that. So that's in the far right. And then in the middle, and this is kind of the core to everything we do, is our Thanksgiving dinner. So that's where the community piece is. And so we served a community dinner for all the students. It was a Thanksgiving feast. It really was a feast. It was a huge amount of food that the staff had prepared for the students, but it was fantastic. And so I kind of symbolically put that in the middle because that's the core of what we do, is to build those relationships. So any questions?
Excellent presentation. So questions or comments, board members have? Amy?
Do you find that there are cohorts that come through that are more responsible and less responsible, that would affect since your numbers are so small to start out with, sort of inordinately affect what's happening with your statistics?
Yes, and that makes it a very difficult moving target because we do have a pretty small pretty small group to norm from. And there is fluctuations, like each year has kind of a theme to the year. It just develops throughout the years. You can kind of see some it's more truancy related, some it's more chemical use related, some it's more mental health related. But there's kind of a theme that kind of comes out through the year. And it is interesting to kind of try and address that moving target throughout the year, because the beginning of the year we don't really know. We have a fairly transient population, so we don't really know. I was just updating credits this morning, and I was updating all the credits of the students that possibly could walk in the door. So it's a little extra work, but I like to have all that stuff just in case they do come in the door. I know where they're at credit-wise, because on that registration, we're not really sure who's going to come through. But it is true. There's kind of a theme throughout each year, and sometimes it's, it could be that this year, that's why I say we're thinking that the advisory period had a positive effect, but it could have been just that cohort that was, their attendance was a little higher than previous years. It's hard to tell, but we try and hit the moving target as best we can. So we try and use the data to see where we're at, what the issue is, and then kind of address that issue as we move through.
How many students, or what percentage, kind of continue on past what would have been their graduation year had they graduated? So do they stay and keep trying a bit longer, or how does that work?
Yep. So every year we do have, and it's like this year we had 33 students that eventually did graduate. We had about 5 or 6 that are continuing on into the summer or next year. And so that's pretty typical that we'll have a handful that'll go into the next year. Some of them only have a credit or 2 left, so they'll be able to finish pretty quickly into their super senior years, what we call it. Whereas others, they may have, we've had some that have had to take a year off for family emergency or things like that, and so they have quite a few credits to go, but they're still persevering. And that's kind of through that social emotional, that's kind of some of those things that we hit on, is to persevere. You'll get through it. And in the 33 graduates that we had, there were some that were super seniors that were finishing and after they were persevering through getting to that finish line.
So do you calculate a graduation percentage then from how would you do that?
So what we're going to do, and I'm working with Hope on this, is because we're going to start to, because of ESSA and because of all the kind of criteria and all the numbers that are kind of swirling around, is that we're going to start to be a little more consistent and deliberate with our 4-year, 5-year, 6-year, 7-year rates. And so when they start high school, that automatically puts them into a certain cohort, and then we just have to track them as to when, if they graduate in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years. And so we're in the process of being more deliberate with that tracking than we have in the past.
And I do have one more question. I don't know if you're the right person to ask this, but do you get a lot of pregnant teenagers, or what happens to pregnant teenagers in the district? I don't even know.
We do have some, yep. I don't know what a lot would classify as, but we do have some. We have a daycare that that's kind of connected to the building, so we try and utilize that. But then we also just try and work with students too that come with children or are pregnant. And again, that's kind of a fluctuating number too. There was, I think it was 3 years ago, we had 0. There was no one in that one, and then the next year we had like 6. And so it just kind of ebbs and flows throughout each year. As you know, I'm not sure exactly why that is, but it's just something that we do notice.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments? No.
My question is regarding attendance.
Yep.
It would seem that your students have a unique situation where they could have several issues affecting their attendance outside of the school.
Yes.
How do you influence attendance?
That's a wonderful question. So we influence as best we can. So there's quite a few different strategies that we kind of put in play. One of them is kind of what you're seeing up there. So we'll do, one of the strengths I think of the ALC is the climate, the atmosphere that we are able to create. And so it's our theme for PBIS is R3, respect yourself, respect others, and respect learning. So I tell all the new students, our goal is to make it a respectful, safe, welcoming environment. So that's what we want everyone to experience when they walk in the door, is to feel safe, feel welcome, feel respected. And I think throughout surveys that we've taken, we take surveys on that as well, the numbers indicate that we're able to do that pretty efficiently or effectively. And so that's one of the things, is we want to remove that excuse of, I don't want to go because I don't feel safe, I don't feel like I belong, I don't feel comfortable. We want to get that out of the way, because that's a huge one. So we do a lot of different things, whether it's things like serving the students meals, whether it's taking them on field trips, whether it's doing the advisory where we get to know the students kind of on a more one-to-one personal level. And so we do quite a few different strategies to try and get to that part. Then we also have kind of the support staff we were talking about that are working behind the scenes. So if there's daycare issues, if there's transportation issues, if there's things like that that's preventing them from getting to school, to try and remove those barriers as best we can. Some of that is very difficult to do, but again, we try our best to try and get as many of those barriers removed as possible. So for each, the advantages that we have, you know, this year we were pretty large. We got in the 80s for one part of the year for numbers of students. But relatively speaking, when you talk about, and Joel comes up and talks about thousands of students, it's a small number. And so we're able, with that relatively small number, to take each case individually and kind of problem solve what's going on here, what can we do to remove those barriers to get them there. So it is time consuming and pretty intense and pretty deliberate. But that does make a difference for getting students there, as you can see with attendance, and if we can remove as many barriers as we can, and then continue to talk about the social emotional things of, you know, that just getting your mindset that you go to school every day, you go to school every day, you go to school every day, and kind of drill that in there, that it does help to, it's not a quick process or an easy process, but that's kind of the goal.
Thank you for your thoughtful answer and for your positive report.
Other questions? Ellen?
So I had one question, but first I was thinking, you were talking about how you're puzzling over the attendance and the credit completion, and I was thinking, you know, it's a good problem to have because in the classrooms now you just have to figure out, okay, what's the next step?
Yep.
And I really appreciated the key reflections piece. I was thinking about how we talked about that at Northfield Forward, so it was really interesting to hear how you were kind of grappling with that. So my question was on, you were talking about implementing some of the career college topics, so I was wondering, are you looking at the ramp-up piece for that, or can you tell us a little bit more about that piece?
So we have some staff members that are doing some curriculum writing over the summer right now, and so they're putting together, they're merging the social emotional topics that we've covered this past year with the new career and college kind of, it's not, we do everything slightly differently, and so it's not the exact ramp up to readiness curriculum, but we're adapting it kind of to our use, and so we're borrowing things from the high school, we're borrowing things from the other ALCs, and kind of meshing that into something that'll work for our location, because it is pretty unique. And so we're kind of deliberately, and we have 3 staff members that are doing curriculum writing to take that task on and say, okay, let's mold it into something that's purposeful, useful, and meaningful to the students.
Thanks, Daryl. I'm always impressed with the work done at our ALC. I'm always impressed with the achievement and so on. I had a question, a literal question. What does advisor look like to a student, this advisory period?
That's a good question.
How do they experience this?
Yep, so we have, every Mondays we have advisory period.
Okay.
And we have it kind of snuck in between second and third period. And so there's 20 minutes of an advisory that we have. And that was due to some research, due to some experience of kind of the optimal time period. And that worked really well last year. That 20 minutes didn't seem like too much or too little. It was a really good amount of time to kind of talk about the topic. And then we did do some activities for certain ones. We did like a chain building, team building activity where they had to do some problem solving and stuff. So it depended on the advisory topic. Some of them were just discussion based, where you just talk with the group of students about whatever the topic may be. Some of them where they were doing actually activities. Some of them they were kind of talking about something that we were going to go on a field trip and experience that way. And so it was kind of a little bit different format each time. It wasn't the same each time. It kind of depended also on the advisory group that they had. And we had a lot of discussion over that as well. And we're going with the strategy of you're going to keep the same advisees throughout the, which is a challenge because the transient population keeps me on my toes to make sure the groups are kind of updated. And so we're going to keep that just so that they get to know the students quite a bit so they can tell how that each activity is going to be received. And so we're changing things up slightly. Where last year we had the topic and then each teacher kind of took that topic. In our PLCs we shared what they were going to do for their topic, what their plan was, and then they also reported on how it went the last one. This year we're going to do with that advisory and we're going to make more of a, it won't be super scripted, but more of a scripted approach of here's the topic, here's the activity that we're all going to do, and it'll be a little bit different that way. So we're going to see as well. Not that last year didn't get received in a positive way, but just to see what way we can tweak it to just make it just that much better. So.
Okay, how many groups are there, advisory groups within the ALC?
So we have one for each teacher. We have 6 current. Okay. Yep. So we have 4 full-time teachers, and then the part-time teachers that are there for it are able to have their own group too.
Okay.
So some of the part-time teachers are there for either the afternoon or the morning, so then they aren't able to. But anyone that's able to has a group.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great questions. Other board members? So I just had a question and a comment. First, the comment, of course, is to congratulate you on the Promising Practice Award. That was really exciting to see, and certainly the ALC has been acknowledged a number of times with state-level type awards, and it's just so well-deserved. You touched a couple times on barriers, and we know what those are, but I'm just wondering where maybe you've seen some trends in barriers. You know, the world is getting more complex, maybe more challenging barriers, maybe some that, you know, just where are your students at with some of the most significant barriers? What are you seeing?
So there are some trends, but it is very unique. Like each year it's just really unique barriers. Daycare is one of those huge ones just due to the cost of it. Daycare is pretty expensive, and so that's a tough one. Transportation is also another one that gets tricky because there's a lot of students, you know, if there's any, hopefully there's no one here that will take offense, but there's a lot of students driving without licenses. They're like, well, I got to get from point A to point B, and if I don't have a license, so be it, I'm going to drive anyway. We definitely discourage that and say you need to get into driver's ed, let's get you a license, let's take that route. But there's also quite a few that don't have a vehicle or don't have the means to get that transportation taken care of. So those are a couple of the ones right off the top of my head that come out. But then, kind of depending on the year, as I was talking with Amy earlier, chemical use that kind of comes and goes. And so our chemical dependency counselor, we're doing different things there too, where we're shifting her time a little bit to make her more available to students. She's also was coming to summer school to be available for students during the summer months when we kind of lose them for that summer chunk there. So she'd offered to come during the summer months to just keep those connections with students. Things like that we're trying to address as best we can, but yeah, it's very unique for each kind of individual situation. And so we try and problem solve a lot of times on the fly and say, okay, what's the situation here and how can we help or fix it?
Excellent. And then just to clarify, I believe when you were talking about 5, 6, and 7-year graduation rates, the state does pay for a student to pursue a degree until the age of 21, correct?
Well,
Or how
yes.
does that work?
Yes, we'll go with that for now. That's mostly with special education, but because a student is qualified for an area learning center, there are pathways for students to continue with that. I think it's also important to note that the area learning center is not just for Northfield, right? We are an area learning center where we often have students from other communities who come and access it for a number of different reasons, whether that be credit recovery through online or some other pieces. And if anyone wants to capture the essence of what the area learning center is, you have to attend one event only to really feel it, and you all know what it is. It's the Area Learning Center graduation. And I could not go for any place in the community for 4 days after your graduation, Daryl, without, and I'm not joking, without someone stopping me and saying, wasn't that Area Learning Center graduation wonderful? It was probably the most attendance that I've seen at a graduation.
It was pretty full. Yeah.
It was quite full in the high school auditorium. And just the moving testimonials, it's the only place where you think about it, there's about 30 graduates and it takes about 90 minutes because every student has a teacher who introduces them and talks about their strengths. And for many of our students in the Area Learning Center, they've overcome these tremendous hurdles, and it's just this incredible family celebration of this turning point in life. And so if people in the community or folks want to understand more about the Area Learning Center, show up to one of those graduations because you will understand the community. That it's one thing to talk about community, it's another to actually experience it. And you go to that graduation and you will not leave there with a dry eye, I guarantee it, because it is a very, very powerful moment. So Daryl, we thank you for your leadership. You have turned our Area Learning Center into what has been rated as the best in the state within the last couple of years. You're being modest because I know the Promising Practice Award said that in a survey, 100% of students reported in a survey that they felt safe and welcome. So Daryl is always modest, but you get 100% of area learning centers to agree that this is the place I want to be, top-notch work. And so it is a beacon for other places to try to follow. So as always, Daryl, great work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daryl. We appreciate it.
Dr. Hillman, can I just ask one practical question? In the elementary project, should it pass, does that mean a daycare would stay at the ALC or would it go to the Greenville as an early childhood?
Yeah, so the daycare program would go to Greenville Park.
Okay.
And we have already worked with Daryl talking about some potential transportation solutions. We actually think that would, in a weird way, even though the current daycare is in the building, it is a struggle for space. And so we do everything we can to get Area Learning Center students to the front of the daycare line within reason. We access county dollars to be able to help pay for it. But by being able to expand the daycare, we would actually be able to provide more spots, for students in the Area Learning Center, and we'd be working on some transportation pieces,
Great.
which
So
we believe we can work through.
Great, so it wouldn't be creating another hurdle, actually be making a hurdle lower.
We actually think would reduce it potentially.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you again, Daryl.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we will move on to the high school continuous school improvement plan presentation by high school principal Joel Weaver. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And I would echo the positive comments about Daryl and the leadership that he shows at the ALC. It's having been in education from student on, I know that the historical framework of area learning centers and similar programs across the states and across the country have been far different than the opportunity that it provides our students here in the district. So great job to all of the people at the ALC. So tough act to follow.
No pressure, Joel.
No, not at all. It was interesting. I was talking with Matt a little bit, we've been pretty consistent with the goals and the pursuits as a building over the last few years, and I liken it to, and maybe this is an unfair or inaccurate comparison, but there are some sports teams that methodically and almost to some extent in kind of a boring way accomplish great things. And really stick to their purpose and stick to their goals in spite of adversity, in spite of successes, and really keep their eye on the prize, so to speak. And I really feel like when it comes down to our programming, I think our programming is constantly evolving. Daryl talked about career and college readiness. We're looking to implement ramp up here this fall. Earlier this spring, I had an opportunity to, you were gracious to allow me to share with you our flex period pilot and the intended flex period that's coming up. And all of those types of things and ever expanding MTSS programming are all designed to get at our goals. So sometimes what we're doing almost appears a little more flashy than the goal structure themselves. So I'm happy to expand on that a little bit tonight and share with you our progress report and our improvement plan. So again, from good to great, and I kind of coined this last year about the high school, that one of the things that we talk about as a staff and really as a whole school community is the fact that we do a lot of things really well. We have scores that other schools want to emulate. We have percentages, graduation rates, passing rates, those types of things, where I'm having conversations with other conference principals and district principals from around the region saying, well, what are you doing here? Can we come visit this? Can we see this program? Can you tell us about what you're doing? And sometimes that can cause a little bit of sense of complacency, like, well, we don't want to tweak things too much because we're doing things pretty good. But I think it's important that we as a staff of Northfield High School continue to look at it from the standpoint of restlessness, that we're doing things that are pretty good, and the additional programs and augmentations to what we're doing are really designed to take that leap from good to great, which of course is not anything near my original statement. So the site improvement plan really allows us to take those concepts in abstraction and put them into play in a concrete way. So the 17-18 improvement plan looked at 3 areas, as you'll remember, and it was looking at specifically the passing rate of all our students. So how well is our student body accomplishing the goal of passing all of their classes? A sub goal of that is looking specifically at the students who are participating in intervention programs as identified by a data structure that we put in place a couple of years ago, and how are those students then responding? Because again, you'll remember they're identified because of academic struggles. So how are the intervention systems then playing a part in getting those students out of those struggles and putting them on a course for success? And then the third piece is a goal based on looking at our school climate and asking students how connected they feel to our high school. And so looking at the data that we have from this last year, our goal was 96% of all students and 88% of students identified for intervention would pass all their classes. You can see that the actual rates were 92.5 and 81%, so short of our intended goal. And again, I think that's a little bit of a creature, and I don't want to make excuses because I'm not interested in that. But it's a little bit of a creature of the numbers we start with. And so I think that to some extent, we really feel like this process of moving from good to great, moving from those percentages of 92, 93 to 96 to 98, and ultimately the goal of 100%, is really about doing the research, looking at programs that work across our state and nation. Daryl mentioned kind of tweaking different programs for the purpose of a fit to the ALC, and then determining how those are going to best work for us. And then putting our best foot forward and seeing how the implementation of those programs work to be successful. So while it's short of our rate, we like the numbers. We're not crazy about them, but we like the numbers, and we really believe it's a place to build on, and you will see momentarily some of the things that we're doing to build on that in terms of the structure of the programs that we offer. The goal of student connectedness, that students who said that they almost always or often feel connected to the school, was up from 77.6%, so we felt that was a positive growth to 82%. But again, looking at that 87% goal, we're coming up short there, so we obviously have some work to do in terms of making sure students feel connected. As I'll mention shortly, some of the things that we're implementing for next year, specifically career college readiness, which will be implemented in the system like an advisory period, where a smaller group of students are working with individual staff, so there are relationships that can be built there, as well as our flex period, an opportunity for kids to gather with adults, carrying adults in smaller numbers. I think we'll begin to address that piece as well. And then, like I said, overall, we're dead set on that 100% passing rate, and we're going to continue to do the things and add the programs that we need really to get at that. And I talked last summer when we talked about the improvement plan, that in the 12 years we've been presenting these, it's really moved from these collective goals to goals that are almost about individual students, one by one by one. And this next slide, in terms of looking at the reflections, as I mentioned, an ever-improving, expanding pursuit of that 100% passing rate, MTSS will now include some additional pieces. I mentioned the flex period opportunities, in which not only will our MTSS programming fit really well, but it will also fit in an equitable fashion. And I think I spoke when we introduced the pilot in the spring, that one of our concerns was the equitable delivery of those opportunities to students who, for schedule purposes, for after-school commitments, for transportation issues, aren't able to access the programs that we offer in those settings. This takes all of that inequitable framework away and allows students to access that. So we're really excited about that piece. But in addition to that, we're looking at adding an additional level of ADSYS math, so a real intense small group section of math at the 11th grade level, and you may remember that we've had that at the 9th and 10th grade level in the past, and so we're expanding that program to hit 3 grades. We had a conversation mid-year, and this is something we're moving forward with again next year, that our SLIFE students, so students with an interrupted formal education, interrupted or limited formal education, really don't have access to some of the classes that they need at their level. And so in many cases in our school, it's a language issue as well as a formal education issue. So we asked a consultant from St. Olaf to come down and kind of visit with us about some problems that we were dealing with, where quite literally the teachers were saying, we can't reach these kids because we can't communicate with them at a place where they need to be at. And so we added a section of math. We call it EL math, but it's really about students who are working on math at a lower level. But again, the complexity of the language piece is buried on top of that. So we have an EL teacher working with math instruction for a group of 4 to 6 kids. So again, if we're thinking about these goals we used to have for 1,200 or 300 at a time, now we're talking about goals of 4 to 6 to 8 students, so that we can ratchet that number up, that passing rate up. And then the increased presence of peer helpers. The peer helper program that was beginning to get off the ground here in 17-18 will be kind of full-fledged. They've gone through the trainings, the advisors really are ready to have that piece soar and really make it something that students know they have access to. And I think with the flex period, we'll have better access to. Again, we have some students who have needs who are really busy. So we talk about some of those traditional needs that students have, but it can also be a matter of a student might have a social emotional need, but they've got 7 classes. And so they don't have time to break away from a math class or an English class to get some of those support pieces that they need. So this will allow us to do that. Continuing to focus on that passing rate for all kids. And then the school climate, I think I mentioned in the spring, related to our flex period and our peer helper program, moving back to that student connection checklist that we've done in the past, and really beginning to narrow down, much like we're doing with MTSS, the individualized student attention of student connectedness, so that in periods like the flex period or those types of opportunities, we can really zero in on the students who are feeling disenfranchised or not connected in any way. An example of that, we've been around this idea of Raider Nation and trying to develop this theme of school climate and school spirit. And we have students who believe that the Raider is strictly and exclusively co-curricular identity. And so really working to rebrand and re-identify ourselves, regardless of what pursuits you have, and if those pursuits are strictly academic, strictly social, or co-curricular, that identity is something that is universal to students and staff who exist here in our school community. So as you look down that list of underneath school climate, that's what we're talking about with the Nuger rebrand. The Newer Communications is working with members of our school staff to kind of develop a formalized approach that will kind of reinvent that idea of what it means to be Raider Nation so that it feels inclusive to all students. And so there isn't that sense of it only speaks to a particular group that are involved in particular things. And so the 18-19 plan, like I said, it might look a little bit like those sports teams that keep doing the same thing and just try to keep getting better and better and better at those things. But again, we believe that our pursuit of the 100% passing rate is something that is a legitimate reality for us, given that, and as you can see from the MTSS piece, those programs come out of identified needs that come out of attempts to address needs. So we identify needs of EL learners. We find out that they have math issues within the confines of EL. And so really it's about continuing to dig down, dive down, and really hit at those individual levels. So we're shooting for that 94% again, and my hope would be that next year we're talking about 96, 98% on that pursuit to 100%. And the 86% of students who are identified for intervention to be passing all their classes as well. And I want to be clear too that just so you're able to kind of delineate those two numbers. The students who are identified for intervention are identified because they are not being successful in a class or two or three at 8 key points during the course of the year. So it makes sense that number would be less than the overall population, but we really believe that we have programs in place that can close that gap in a short amount of time, in some cases between midterm and the end of a quarter, or between quarters and the end of the semester when the official grading period occurs. And like I said, both with that piece and the interventions available to students, and then the number 2 goal with the increase of 10% for students who feel connected to the school, we really feel like we've got a golden opportunity with the flex period and the college and career readiness curriculum to really push the envelope on the school climate piece, as well as those academic supports in an equitable fashion. And so I think we have covered those. And then strategies and assessments for each of those. And so 1 and 3 obviously are interplayed together. So the MTSS, that is not the DATE team, that's the data team. That would be an interesting component of MTSS. But the data team, the programming that we have for MTSS, which is a list that's growing larger than the one slide that we use for our 8th grade orientation program in the spring. Our ADSYS programming, which continues to expand, and again, ADSYS is really concentrated, small group, intense instruction for students who come to the table with some struggle, whether it be language or academic or otherwise. Our peer health program and academic student coaches, and then of course the flex period that you've heard a lot about recently. I'm going to skip over to 3 just because, like I said, those 2 goals kind of play well together. PLCs continue to be a foundation for good core instruction and the development of what works and what doesn't, and having those collaborative collegial conversations within our departments and across departments, and a rigorous curriculum. One of the things I think that is the biggest pride for me is whether it's advanced placement courses, regular courses. We have countless students who come back and talk about the ease with which they transitioned to college, because the rigor here when they left was equal to, and in some cases better than, or higher than the rigor that they're running into at their colleges and universities. And I'm not just talking lower level colleges and universities, but big time schools where they're saying they're having easy times, or they're functioning almost like a tutor in their freshman classes because classmates don't understand this physics concept. Well, they learned that in Messer's physics class, or they don't understand this math concept, and they learned it in Huffeld's pre-calculus class or calculus class. So those really feel good, and we want to continue to push in that direction so all students are adequately challenged. I love the elementary term, the Just Right book, or the Just Right curriculum, and we still want it to be that, but we want kids to really have to stretch and feel that sense of accomplishment when they're successful, rather than just feeling success for the sake of, or by way of lowering a bar so that they can reach it easily. Just because we've never been about that and really have no intention of being about that now. So. And with that, 2 beautiful full color pictures to wrap this up and open it up for questions.
Excellent, thank you, Joel. Questions, comments, Margaret?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. Thank you again. And the one thing I love about Northfield Schools is, as you just said, we don't rest on our laurels. We don't say we're pretty good, so we're not going to change much. It seems like we're always looking, you and the other principals and Matt, always looking for ways to make it better or to take in a change that has occurred. And I can speak, my children had college as their goal, and all 3 of them, 2 are out, 1 is in college right now, 2 are done, have all said it was Northfield High School that got them ready, and that college was not necessarily easy, but they felt very well prepared for school. And I think it made a big difference that when you come in prepared and have a success your first year, it makes the others easy. So I just wanted to say thank you to you for the excellent work at Northfield High School and really to all of our administration.
Thanks, Margaret. That means a lot.
Amy?
Thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely, you bet.
I have a few questions. My first question is, what percentage of students that start at the high school end up at the ALC? I love the juxtaposition of the 2 reports, but I'm curious how that works.
Yeah, what percentage? I would have to look that up and get back to you.
Any ballparks?
Daryl's got a ballpark that he's about to share.
So we have, like, of our 80 students that we have.
Dale, you could why don't you step to the podium so that the
I'd say it's pretty
Video
small,
can
because
take
we had 80 students in our building at the peak of last year. And as Dr. Hillman said, we had some Faribault students, some New Prague students, so there was, take all the students that weren't from the Northfield High School out of that equation. You're probably looking at the most, maybe 50 students out of the, how many do you have? 1,400. 1,400. So, at the very most, you'd have 50.
So like 4%, 5%, something like that.
And Daryl talked about stealing all of our ideas. I'm paraphrasing. He said it a little more kindly. The truth of the matter is that we do that back and forth, and we have noticed over the years. We've developed programs that allow students to access some different success opportunities at the high school than they used to be able to. Where if they didn't fit the mold, the ALC was the next option. And really, we've learned a lot from the framework of what Daryl and his team have done in terms of I would look at Odyssey Wear as a credit recovery piece, for example. But our MTSS program is a lot of what Daryl's team have been doing for years and years and years, only we're doing it at the high school level and have finally figured out that we don't have to have a one-size-fits-all model. And really that idea of individualized instruction and really drilling down to that individual student, or if not the individual student, certainly small groups, is really the foundation of what his program does. So we talk about retaining students that might otherwise move on to the ALC or other programs. But really that's about developing programs that look like what he has been offering all along. And really that's great because then it frees up space for other districts to access our services, right?
Well, there's a reason I asked that question, because as I was looking at your goals of 96% of high school students, pass all their classes, I wonder if there's almost a natural level of students who may not be passing all their classes that sort of end up heading toward the ALC. Sort of like they talk about the economy and natural unemployment rate, and I'm not trying to rationalize this for you.
Sure.
Or give you an excuse not to shoot for 100%,
Right.
but I'm just wondering if there's a sort of a natural rate.
Sure, and that's a fair question, and it may seem a little idealistic to say, I don't believe that that's necessarily the case. The truth of the matter is, though, that I think we have gotten smarter, and I mean we, the educational institution, at least here in Northfield we have, that Daryl and I recognize that the ALC isn't necessarily a program for kids that can't be successful at the high school. It's a different type of program for perhaps a different type of student. And that different type of student might be different because of the way they respond socially, emotionally, developmentally, academically, and Darryl, focused a lot on attendance. There are aspects of his program that we can't offer in terms of flexibility. He did a daycare center. We don't have one. And I don't mean to make light of that particular example, but I think that we have gotten better about saying the ALC isn't the other program, it's another program. And really looking at what we do in a way that says, here at the high school, we are going to broaden our supports and maximize student opportunity for success. And if all of those supports still result in an identification of a student who just isn't meeting the success that we feel they're capable of, then the ALC is a great option for that. So I see the relationship between the two schools as much more of a partnership, almost in the sense of saying, we are about student success, and so how they get it. And I think that's part of why our district is very positive in their interaction with homeschool programs, with online programs, with the charter schools that we've partnered with over time, or even if we don't partner with, that we recognize all of those versions of education as valid. And we want to get the students in the places where they are going to flourish best. Because the story that Margaret spoke of in terms of moving on to being successful in college, that's replicated by ALC students and homeschool students and online students. But in my mind's eye, I think it's about making sure the students have an opportunity to be placed in that gap where they feel most comfortable and they fit best.
And I guess it's what I was wondering, if the students who aren't fitting right in the high school might be the ones who consequently aren't passing their classes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where every school that will come up here and talk about their improvement goals talk about relationship building and school climate and sense of belonging and sense of connectedness. So there are many aspects, and again, social, emotional, developmental, academic, all of those means through which we can get at students, but also all of those things that can be ultimate obstacles for students. We want to make sure that we're cognizant that we're seeing things through their lenses, and making sure that what we are trying to kind of force feed them, bad choice of words, what we are trying to provide them fits those needs and fits those comforts. Because you can have an academically capable student that for whatever social emotional reason just can't connect. Because we have students that come with a lot of social emotional stresses that I, for one, in my upbringing background, have to work very hard at being aware of, because they weren't part of my reality. And that struggle replicates itself across our building, so we really have to be aware of what stories those students bring, and then being able to kind of filter those stories through the lens of saying, okay, so what does that then, and how does that inform how we respond?
And this one, part of Amy's question was around that when you hit the mid-90s percentile, it can be very, very difficult to move that needle all the way to the right. And I've been engaged in debates and discussions about this for nearly my entire career because of the No Child Left Behind Act, when it said 100% of people will be proficient by 2014. And anyone who's ever been in a classroom knew that we can't probably get everybody 100% proficient in the same year. I think that's where we're getting better, is we're recognizing with a 5, 6, 7 year graduation rate that students learn at different rates. But we have internally determined that our goal, that all means all, no stone unturned, because it goes back to what Margaret said. If we say, well, our goal is 95%, boy, we got to 95%, boy, we made it, that's great. That is the failing of institutions like ours, because that's when students do get left behind. And so, as flawed as No Child Left Behind was, the goal was honorable, because which among us want our children to be in the 5%?
Right.
Nobody, right? So, and what we know about high quality educators is the number one thing that is if you look across any study, what they will look at in terms of what makes a really successful teacher Number one always is that they believe that every child can learn. If you don't believe that every child can learn and can achieve proficiency, they are going to be at different rates. We all need to find a different business, because we have to be, if we are not the people who are shining light on every child, who's going to do it? And so that goal of 100% makes it very difficult, because if you look at the straight numbers, the cynic could say, well, geez, they missed their goal. Okay, they missed their goal, but you know what? The fact is that we talk about stretch goals, we talk about pursuit of 100%, because even though we may not ever achieve 100%, we're going to keep going after it, because that's what we do. And I want every parent in the district to know that we will not leave any stone unturned when it comes to their child, whichever program that we're able to implement for them.
The other piece to that, Matt, is that when we talk about the goal of passing rate, the reality is that you don't need to pass all your classes to graduate from Northfield High School. So, to Margaret's point about, always looking to achieve more, all students passing all their classes is well more than they need to pass to be successful. But we don't want to rest on that 23 number. We would love to see students taking 7 classes, passing all of them, and leaving here with not only 28 credits, but extra experiences that will, just further enhance their experience once they leave here.
And can I ask you one more thing, just a quick summary of, well, the last time we talked to you, you were going to try out that flex lunch hour. Can you tell us in 1 minute what your trial was like?
Sure.
And how that went?
I would say overall very positive. In fact, there were a small group of staff and a larger group of students who I believe started the petition that it continue on the rest of the school year. And we just weren't prepared for that at the time, but that was really good to hear. I think that students and staff recognize the opportunity very quickly. There are challenges. We look at food service, and we're going to continue to have conversations about that truncated lunch period. Bless the people who are in our child nutrition program, both at the district level and building level, because they have approached it from the standpoint of these are challenges, but we'll make it work. I've never had a conversation with any of them where they haven't included that last phrase. And so that's been wonderful. Jim Culseth in buildings and grounds with the increase in terms of responsibility of their lunches all over the building. So garbage has to be all over the building. Not garbage containers. Gotta be careful what I say. But it was overwhelmingly positive, and certainly some tweaks to make as we move into the fall, and that was always our expectation. But I think students and staff are excited about it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ellen?
Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Northfield Forward reviewed all the site improvement plans, and I alluded to that with Daryl's. And so there was a few questions that I wanted to ask about that came up during the Northfield Forward piece. One of them Amy already asked, which was the connection between ALC and the high school. Another one that came up was the college life plan and career and college ready plan.
The 4-year plan?
Well, on the ALC, it has 100% of seniors will have a post-secondary life plan on the ALC. And there's the tying on the site improvement plan, they reviewed last year's, of course, not this year's, that there's the equitable opportunities and support for all career and college paths. So there was a question of, will the high school ever have a goal like the ALC and knowing that you're going to have the ramp-up period and flex period, do you see that in the future, that being able to say not just 100% pass, but 100% pass and 100% have a post-secondary plan? Is that sort of on the...
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a very realistic pursuit for us. And I would say that as we look at our college and career readiness, and obviously specifically the ramp-up piece, which has really been led by one of our 3 guidance counselors in terms of kind of the exploration of and beginning implementation of, and Mark Ensrud. It is a very natural fit for the idea of the 4-year plan in terms of how do we get from the beginnings of 9th grade to being college ready from the academic standpoint, which is what the 4-year plan has kind of been to this point. But then shifting that to say, okay, how are we then spending those 4 years developing a plan so that career can be a component of that? And I think the college career readiness component of our flex period absolutely dovetails very nicely into that. And I would see, I think it would be a disservice to the students if we didn't pursue that here in the next couple of years, for sure.
Excellent questions. Other board members? No.
Thank you for your report.
You're welcome.
And particularly the way you speak of the relationship with the other opportunity for education. It seems to be transparent, without hurdles, and doable. And I admire that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell.
Excellent. Other questions, comments?
Okay, one quick comment. Thanks for your report. Very good.
You're welcome.
On you talked about branding of a logo. Was that, can you talk more about that?
Yeah, not so much branding of a logo, but branding of the concept of Raider Nation. So through Darrell talked about PBIS at the ALC. That's a lot of letters. And our PBIS initiative was really where the idea of Raider Nation came out. So kids have, all of our students have Raider Nation t-shirts and some themes around building that school community. But one of the unexpected results of that was a group of students who really saw Raider Nation as being about sports, really, quite frankly, but certainly co-curriculars and extracurriculars. So that team kind of went back to the drawing board to say, well, that wasn't our intent. So how do we package this in a way that really makes students understand that regardless of where they come from or what activities they participate in during the school day, after the school day, how do we create the concept of Raider Nation so that it includes everyone? And so not so much about a logo specifically, but about those words, Raider Nation, and what does that mean? So one of the things that Newer Communications has done is begun to link, and you've seen the PBAS, the Pride at the middle school and high school, and so looking at some of those theme words, if you will, and really trying to make those a very common, understood set of concepts for everyone that walks through here. And so we're actually meeting later this week with the newer folks to kind of talk about some of those key words and what we can do in terms of the aesthetic of the building to really draw attention not only to Raider Nation, but also to what it is to be, what does it mean to be Raider Nation? And the words are intentionally and purposely universal. So yes, they certainly can apply to what you would do on a basketball court, but it's also going to apply to what you do walking down the hallway or sitting in a classroom or sitting with friends at lunch. There's not a context in which those words are meant to be included. They're words meant to be universal.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Joel. This was such a really good report and so many exciting things happening at the high school. And I'm glad that Amy asked about Flex Hour because, of course, that's one of the I think one of the most exciting things to happen. And I was fortunate enough to tour one of the Flex Hour days, and it was really, really fun to see. There was kids out playing frisbee, and there were kids who were huddled around the table working on some chemistry, and they had a couple of speakers. In fact, one of the speakers crammed 115 students into one classroom.
Into a regular size classroom.
To a regular, yes.
Cover your ears, Jen.
Yes, I was just going to say. Yes.
With 3 exits, 7 windows that push out. How am I doing?
Yes. But my daughter happened to be in on that particular presentation and said we were all crammed in there and you could hear a pin drop. I mean, so it's just so exciting, and it's there's so many exciting pieces to this report and to what's happening at the high school. So congratulations.
Thank you
for your work.
Appreciate
It's
that.
really good.
And just,
Really good.
I want to thank the high school for continuing to push things. I mean, if you think about some of the programs that we've had to make sure that every child gets there, the Torch program partnership, which has long been a success. We almost take that for granted now. The 9th grade academy, which will be in its 9th year. Think about that. 10th year coming up for the 9th grade academy, that dramatically reduced, the amount of failures in the freshman year, which research shows is so important. If you think about the fact that Northfield High School every year is ranked among the best high schools in the nation, the top few percentage points by a number of different rankings. We just, we're waiting on the percentage of students who got college credit for AP courses that they took. But yet, if you look at our percentage of kids who get career or college credit, via the AP program, the high school does a great job of taking one step further and looking under the hood. And they looked at who are those students getting college credit. And they realized that group of students didn't look like the rest of our student body in terms of their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their socioeconomic status. So we've had PLC that's been working on how can that great program be available and include more students? So I think it goes to examples that board members have suggested here tonight, that it's what's next, right? That's one of my mantras, is what's next. And I think over the years, the high school has shown the willingness to say what's next, to make sure that every student gets to take advantage of this rich, rigorous curriculum that Northfield High School has to offer. So we're very thankful for the high school administration, and we're very thankful for the staff that continue to push beyond comfort zones and make people feel a little bit uncomfortable in terms of some of the things that we try. But we don't shy away from trying something else to make sure every child has that chance to be successful. So thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Dr. Hill.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so we will move on to the next report, which is actually myself, and I want to give a summary of the Dr. Hillman's annual performance appraisal. And the performance appraisal period was July 1st of 2017 to June 30th of 2018. And once again, Dr. Hillman had a very strong performance. His overall average was 4.9 on a 5-point scale. 4 of his most important and significant accomplishments highlighted by board members was Dr. Hillman's exceptional work administering all aspects of the district's November operating levy and bond election. Dr. Hillman put in an extraordinary effort leading up to the election, learned from the initial failure, and has worked to find a new way forward. Even when confronted with failure and setbacks, his leadership is inspiring and visionary. Secondly, the implementation of both the social-emotional learning curriculum and the new literacy curriculum called Collaborative Classroom. Dr. Hillman's work on implementing these two important initiatives was outstanding. His oversight of all aspects of the social-emotional learning, as well as his work to ensure the successful launch of the new literacy curriculum, which is the most significant curriculum change in the district's history. Thirdly, his outstanding communication and relationship building skills. Dr. Hillman is exemplary at communicating the mission, needs, and triumphs of the Northfield schools. He is excellent at fostering respectful and mutually supportive relationships with the ultimate goal of providing the best possible educational environment for Northfield students. And lastly, his exemplary management of the district finances. And Dr. Hillman and his team have continued the impressive stewardship of the district's resources. Again, board members gave Dr. Hillman an exceedingly positive annual performance, and we have all expressed great confidence in your leadership and abilities to continue to move the district forward. So a lot of key words: outstanding, exemplary, and exceptional to describe your performance. So thank you for your hard work and for all you're doing for the district. It's very much appreciated.
It is my pleasure. As I told Ellen today, this is my dream job. This is fantastic, and it's I have a great team of people. Val Murdestorff and Jim Colseth are here tonight. You had a couple of our building administrators, and they do the work, and I get to talk about it, so it's a pretty good arrangement for me. So I'm very thankful for my team, and I'm thankful to work for you and for our community. So I appreciate the kind words.
Excellent. No, you have a comment?
I want to thank Julie for putting the report together,
Well,
consolidating our thoughts and putting it together as a report. Thank you.
thank you for board members who worked hard on providing Dr. Hillman with the important feedback and the positive comments that he so deserves. So,
Yes, I very much value the ratings are of course an important piece, but I very much value board members' comments, especially when they include very specific things, because that helps us take success and continue to try to replicate it. So I look forward to serving you for far into the future.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, so next we will move on to Dr. Hillman actually will present a preliminary contingency fund report, just talking about the contingency fund for 2018-19.
Yes, thank you, Julie. So as you know, one of the things we hear over and over again, and I think we've probably heard it, for the last several decades, is about class size and people's concerns about class size. And we're not unique. That's, nearly every school system has those kinds of concerns. But it is one of our district strategic plan near-term priorities, and that is to develop a long-term solution that allows for reasonable class size while maintaining financial stability. And I appreciate the board over the past couple of years has expanded the contingency fund, which, remember, the contingency fund is a set of teaching full-time equivalents or a set of teaching FTE that we budget for, and then we are able to use that at various parts in the district where there are some hotspot concerns about class size. So you remember just a few years ago, we had 3 FTE. Last year, we went to 4. And this winter, I had made a proposal for us to take it to 6. And I just wanted to share with you that we've really allocated we've allocated 4.9 of the 6.0 right now. Just to give you a rundown, Northfield High School next year will have the largest 9th through 12th grade population that people can remember. You've got the largest class in the district, 360 around as seniors. You have a very large 9th grade class coming in, and last year's graduating class was less than 300. So you have a couple of things conspiring at the high school where they need some additional FTE. You'll see that we've already allocated 3.5 of that FTE to the high school. And Joel Lear is a master scheduler, and he's almost dead on when it comes to what he thinks he's going to need with that additional FTE. At Bridgewater Elementary, you know that this year's in the rising 4th grade class has been a grade level that has had 5 sections since they were in kindergarten. It's a larger class. As you see, there are 115 students. We've been using an FTE of contingency fund to help them bubble through the school, right? That's a cohort that we have been supporting for several years. At Northfield Middle School, to begin with, Principal Greg Gelano was looking at, they always need a little bit of elective support. And you say, well, why would we use contingency for elective support? Because of some of the music options and some of those things at the middle school, it depends upon how many students participate in music in terms of how many other electives they need. So it depends upon the year and some of the ratios and the balance of how they might need to use that. So we had intentionally said we're not going to spend all this FTE because we want to be very careful with it. However, in mid-June, I just want to give you this heads up that what we have had is we already have 105 kindergartners registered at Bridgewater. Now, if you can do the math in 4 sections, which that was planned for 4 sections as we usually plan every year, because we have a long history of mostly having 4-section classes at the elementary schools. However, with 105 by July 9th, that's about 26 kindergartners, and I have been a pre-K elementary through 3rd grade elementary principal, pre-K 2nd elementary principal, and I'll tell you 26 kindergartners in one room is a challenge. So I want to give you a heads up that we have most likely a need for a full-time equivalent there. Our 6th grade has continued to grow to where, as of the last report, they were at 340 students enrolled in 6th grade already in mid-June, and if you think about it, those are typically 10-section grade levels. So depending on the core subject course, you could have a range of core class sizes at 30 to 34. So these are 2 areas that we're keeping a close eye on. We were not making a recommendation to you yet tonight about that because we still have a full-time equivalent. There are still some other pieces we might be able to move within the district. But what I don't want to do is come back in August and say, oh my gosh, our hair is on fire. I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to hear about this now so that you can understand that there's a very real possibility that I may be bringing to you at the first meeting in August a request to expand the contingency fund for the 2018-19 school year. And we know that this is a strategic plan, near-term initiative. We know that when we communicate to the voters through our operating levy, we talk about trying to maintain our class sizes. So unless there's real strenuous objection to me pursuing that, I'm giving you the heads up that I'm probably going to bring it, but if there are people who are saying, well, we really shouldn't do that, right, that would be a good thing for me to know now. But with only 1 meeting in July, that's my concern, is that we may have to make some administrative preparations prior to our next board meeting. So I wanted to give you the report. We're using those FTE in a very strategic way. It's based upon the fact that we have some certain segments of the district. We have some of the larger classes that we've had in many, many recent years in memory. And so what we're really looking for is how can we best spend that to strategically reduce class sizes where it will make the most difference. And so 6th grade being a transition year, kindergarten being a transition year, that's why you're hearing those things from me tonight. So nothing required of a vote, but I just want to give you that heads up.
Excellent. Questions?
I just want to clarify in my head. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to clarify in my head. So what you're saying is right now, I'm sorry. So what you're saying right now is if we're increasing to 6.0 FTE contingency, and all of these in this chart add up to 4.9,
Yep.
we only have 1.1 FTE left.
Correct.
But you might be coming back and saying, you know what, we're really going to need 1 FTE for each of these issues in the paragraph. So we're going to expand it from 6 to 6.9. Something like that.
Or around 7, yes.
Okay, thanks.
That's exactly what I'm asking. Thank you for helping clarify that.
Thank you.
Martin,
So-
or Amy.
I have a couple questions. The first is, would this be a one-year change, or would you see it more as a permanent change because the students are here?
So what I like about the contingency approach that we've used, and we have looked at this a number of different ways, give me 10 minutes to argue, I can argue both sides of the coin and be pretty effective at it. What I like about the contingency piece is just because a grade level needs to be in a broader number of sections 1 year doesn't necessarily mean that the next year they would need to. So having that contingency FTE that the central office administration assigns, and then it comes back at the end of every year, what that really does is I think it's a good stewardship piece, because it forces us to make sure that we're sharpening our pencil and making sure that we have assigned the appropriate amount of teaching staff to every location, because class size is not straight math. I can tell you, having taught in a very small school district, there were years that 15 felt like 35 and 30 felt like 12. And so sometimes I think people think about class size as a straight mathematical equation, and I can tell you with my 20 plus years of experience, it is not a straight mathematical equation. So we're continuing to look at what are the needs of a cohort. There are some times that we may have a smaller cohort that could survive in a 3-section grade, for example, at an elementary building, but because of a number of factors, they may need to be in 4 sections. So we're really trying to help people get away from this, let's just do the straight division of the number of students and the number of teachers to create the average, because in this case, the average does not always tell the whole story. So one of the concerns I think people might have about bringing that back every year is there are some folks who may not have a guarantee for a job the next year. Certainly an understandable concern. At the secondary, it's very rare that we hire a full-time person with contingency funding, because most of the time we don't need another full-time social studies teacher. We might need another 2 sections. And so teachers will also often teach an extra period above and beyond their 5 assigned periods. The collective bargaining agreement allows them for additional compensation for that. And so we don't necessarily need to hire someone new. Now at the elementary level, yes, there is the truth that people would know on a year-to-year basis that may not be something that is completely supported each year. But we post the positions in that way, and so people know what they're signing up for when they come into it. And however, because of the natural turnover in the district, many people who've been hired on a contingency, for a contract that was governing a contingency position, have stayed with the district for years because of the natural evolution of people who leave the district, retire, etc. And then we have people who have worked for us who then, slide into those full-time ongoing positions. So in a smaller school district, I would have a concern about that commitment to people, because we value people. We want to make sure that they feel valued. I don't see it as huge of an issue here because of the natural turnover and some of those things. And so it does provide the greatest flexibility for us. It provides us the opportunity to be good stewards and making sure that we're putting the FTE where it can be the most useful. And I will tell you that over the next couple of years, as we continue to work on our continuous improvement, that is going to be an area where we continue. Are we really spending all of our FTE in the places where it can do the best for kids? And so that's a piece that we want even more of that review, if you will.
I really like your answer, but I don't think I phrased my question clearly.
Okay, well, very good. Let's try number 2.
All right, so my question was, if we increase, it's not the people themselves, but would you be coming back and saying we want to increase our contingency fund from 6 FTE to 7 FTE, for instance, on a permanent basis?
Sure. So right now what I would do is I would ask for it for 1 year, and then we'll evaluate it during the coming year if we need to think that we need to look ahead. And remember, the purpose of the contingency is to know that we're going to have these additional positions and to budget for it. So many school districts get into trouble because they show up in August and say, oh my goodness, we need to hire 5 more people. Well, we have already built that into the system. So we will start by saying it's a 1 year, and then we'll reevaluate.
And the summer's going by really quickly, so I'm assuming that what you're also asking is, if you decide you need this, you need to start the process of hiring people before we meet again and sort of get that moving.
Well, at least some of the procedural pieces in terms of the posting and those kind of, you of course would not have an opportunity to approve anything until the August 13th board meeting anyway. But I wanted to give you the heads up and just to get some some initial feedback if there was people are comfortable with that, and then we would actually look at. I have told the principals that we're not going to make a decision on this for another week or so because we want to see, do those increase or are there any other modifications before we determine what we need to do. But But again, I didn't want to come to you in August and say, we just realized that we have this many students.
Other questions or comments? Ellen?
So I guess I would just say I really appreciate the heads up and that, of course, we don't want our kindergarten classes that large and in thinking about the middle school students in their transition year. So I really appreciate you giving us the heads up and that, that all of the tools that you and the administrators are looking at to sort of make these predictions. It makes sense to me.
And if I could just add on that we're very fortunate that at Bridgewater, Nancy Antoine does have a plan because they are out of space. And so they are going to do some additional revision of how they're going to have special education classrooms located because special education classrooms will be going to slightly smaller areas and more people sharing a room to free up the space. If we got to that point at Sibley, where they were just under 100 students, if we were to get to, there is no more room, there's for the coming year. So the issue is that we are running into these space issues at some of our elementary buildings, and our building principals have been incredibly very thoughtful about how they look at space to try to make sure they can accommodate all those things. But we're very fortunate that Nancy was able to devise a plan to be able to free up a classroom for this. In other places, that may not be the case.
Other questions or comments? I had one question just for clarification. So in terms of open enrollment, we are really redirecting those students not necessarily to the building of that particular family's choice. So we are
Correct.
We are managing those requests around numbers.
That's exactly right. And so I just, the key thing there, and I think it's prudent in the next few months for me to give a presentation a little earlier than the enrollment options report about school choice, within our community. So when we have a student who's applying for open enrollment or non-resident agreement, they don't get to choose the elementary school that they go to. We can place them. There's a couple of other rules without going down a rabbit hole here, I'll stop there for now. But what we are doing is we are pushing students to, we're assigning students to buildings where there may be a lower class size. Now, there's also some complication of if students are coming from what's called an integration district. And so in some cases, we may have a student from a neighboring district, for example, Lakeville, which is an integration district, and if they already have a student in that building, because we have to take them, a sibling coming in, they may go to that building as opposed to being assigned to a different building that may have a lower class size. So there's a number of complicated factors with it, but in general, and we've done this for several years, we will say we don't have room in this particular grade at this building that was your first choice, but we do here and here. And so we've routinely done that, but we're even being more specific with that in the last couple of years.
Excellent. Okay, great. Yes. So, I agree with Ellen. I just think this is such a really excellent strategy, and I think it also points to, our fiscal responsibility and that we have the resources to be able to direct, these kinds of resources where they're needed. So it's really excellent.
And our teaching staff is excellent in terms of just understanding that this is how these things roll and that there's some decisions that have to be made in the summer.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So we will potentially hear further update on August as we move forward there. So our next and last discussion topic is master facilities plan discussion. So lots of elements to get to tonight around that very broad topic. One thing I did want to mention that the facilities exchange, thought exchange results were in your table file, which is really exciting because we weren't sure if they were would be ready since the survey itself didn't close until July 3rd. So it's excellent that we can see those, and we'll weave that into the discussion as we work through this topic.
So Julie and I are going to co-facilitate this topic as we go through. We really have three parts tonight. The first of which is Mark Hayes from ATS&R, an architectural firm who has helped us with our master facilities plan, is here. He's going to lead off with us by giving us some not unexpected, but still some news that we want to make sure that you hear. Then Director of Finance Val Murdersdorf and I will walk you through some potential financial options that you would have before you that leverage existing debt to reduce the cost to our taxpayers. And then the third piece is I will walk you through some of the thought exchange results. You have just a very high-level overview in your packet. All of you this afternoon should have received an email from Thought Exchange, which will give you a username and password to be able to get into the back side of the system, to be able to even look at more detail than what you were presented with this evening. I'll give just a brief overview of that here on the screen to finish off, and then we'll just have some general discussion. Does that sound reasonable?
Excellent.
So, Mr. Hayes, if you would step to the podium and give us some information about costs of the projects.
Yes, good evening, and nice to see everybody again, and thanks for
Yes,
inviting me this
thanks for
evening.
being, it's been a while since we've seen you, Mark,
has.
so it's
It's
good
been too long,
good
I
to see you
think.
back. We're
But
sorry you're burning a beautiful summer evening to be here, but thank
Oh,
you.
no problem. It's nice to hear all the neat things that are going on in the district. It's fun to sit back here and just hear all the discussion that's going on, so it's good. I should be here every board meeting, actually. Anyway, so, yeah, so I wanted to give you an update. I've been, of course, talking with Dr. Hillman about potential for upcoming referendum potentially. And so we've been looking at cost estimates as we do. And just a reminder so that, you know, a year ago for last year's referendum, you know, we're putting together cost estimates probably in July to go for a November referendum, to go to review and comment. And then we project those cost estimates to when we think the project would actually be bid. So based on when we think the project would be bid for construction, we need to project those estimates that amount of time into the future. So the system that we use, or one of the indices that we use, it's called the ENR index, which is the Engineering News Record Index. It's an industry publication where they track construction costs throughout the United States based on different locations, based on large cities, based on, you know, different cities in the whole United States. So therefore, we can do things with this ENR index. We can take a project as an example. If we built a project in Minneapolis, you know, well, what would the cost be if we built this in Philadelphia based on their location factor? If we bid a project, say, 5 years ago, say you bid a new elementary 5 years ago, well, what would the cost of that new elementary be, you know, today? You take the ENR index, it's a number, you put that multiplier in there, and it gives you a pretty darn good accurate reading of what that cost would be. And then we also take those costs to help try to predict what the future would be, okay? Which is very difficult, but we know that this ENR index for the last 15 years has been at about a 4% annual increase in inflation rate. So that's when we've been doing estimates for the last many years, it's typically been about a 4% inflation rate per year. Okay, and that's actually the number that we had when we did the referendum in November of 2017. Then we started to see, just in the last year, we started to see some changes in construction inflation. And after the referendum, we've been talking to Dr. Hillman, and so we did some new updates in March. We changed inflation to 5% per year, and we actually added another 5%, kind of an added multiplier because of what we've been seeing. And so now what we've done is using the most recent ENR index, which is June of 2018, we've adjusted it even more. And because we've seen, probably in the last 6 months, probably the biggest jump in construction inflation that we've seen potentially in 40 years. Okay? So, and it's just a reality check of where we are right now in time, partly due, I believe, I'm not an expert, but partly due, I believe, to, you know, low unemployment. I think that could lead to a higher cost for labor. There's also, it's a tighter job market, so it's hard to find, you know, skilled labor in certain disciplines. And then, as you all hear on TV about the whole trade, the tariffs that are being imposed, I just heard on the radio today, I believe that they did impose some of those tariffs on aluminum and steel in June. So before it was a bunch of discussion, not sure what's going on, the market's kind of not sure what to do, the market's going up. Anyway, I think they've imposed those tariffs now in June. So, so I do know that based on the ENR index that, like I said, in the last 6 months or so, we've seen almost an 18% increase in the cost in construction cost for the year. So talking to Dr. Hillman, it just seemed prudent to bring it to your attention, to his attention. And so right now we're looking at some new cost estimates above and beyond what we were looking at back a year ago. And it's actually an increase of about 17.5% for some of the projects.
Just to clarify that, repeat that again. So the 18% is what, again, tell us that
So we are seeing, I'm gonna say we're seeing about an 18, I'm gonna say a 17.5% increase in the construction, well, increase in inflation for the construction cost of a project
Over the last year.
over the last year. Okay, so another way to look at that too would be, so we had anticipated a 4% increase in inflation, and now what we're seeing is we're seeing 18%. So that'd be like about a 14%, 13 to 14% increase. But then, and that's just to bring us up to today. That's to right now today. And so then what we've done is we're taking that, but we're only adding a 5% inflation. So we're anticipating that, depending on what happens, but we're anticipating that potentially we could be bidding maybe a new elementary school, if this all happens, right? A new elementary school potentially June of 2019. The other elementary projects, all those other remodeling, alterations, projects, additions, those would not be bid later until like November of 19. So we're taking like another year to maybe a year and a half of inflation at 5%. So you kind of have to, those are a little bit cumulative. So again, even though I said for the last 15 years we've been at 4%, right now we're at about 17.5%. I'm not seeing that this is going to continue at 17.5%, you know, for the next year. I think it's going to kind of stabilize like it always does. And I'm speculating it's going to continue at maybe a 5%. So I don't mean to complicate things, but I'm not taking this 18 or 17% and projecting it for the next year. That kind of brings us to where we are right now today. But I don't think that's going to continue. I just don't think it could continue. So we're being I guess we're just being a little conservative, if that's the word, to say, well, instead of 4%, it's kind of a 20% increase, to say, well, it's going to be 5%, which is more than we've seen in the last 15 years, but we're at this kind of a blip right now. What's going to happen in the future?
So I think to summarize what Mark is saying is that let's just take a look just at Greenville Park Elementary, because we know the entire project, you know, in terms of there's been a couple of minor modifications. But Mark, when we look at what we had projected last November for a new elementary school on the Greenville Park campus, that number was approximately 23 million.
23.5 million.
And what are you projecting at it now?
27.6.
So in less than 1 year, we've increased by about $4 million add to that construction cost. Now, back in March, when we gave you the initial report about the updated master facilities plan, we had told you that we would project about a $36.895 million project with everything included in terms of the Greenville Park, the new elementary school on the Greenville Park campus, the modest renovation of the current building to be able to accommodate the Early Learning Center, the minor work at Longfellow, the work at Sibley, and the work at Bridgewater. And now what Mark is suggesting, and when we get to the next part of the financial documents, you'll see that we're projecting the project cost to be at $38.81 million, which is about $2 million more than it was in March. Now again, what Mark has said here is it's been compounded, right? Because it's not just that we're projecting 5%. Initially it was projected 5%. Then in March we add another 5%. And the math of adding percentages, though some people like to just add, we know it doesn't work that way, right? So. Right. It is a compounding piece, and now we're adding an additional because Mark has shared working with a very large school system in the state that passed a referendum last November where they had to reject bids on one of the buildings because of the fact that the inflation had outgrown what the voters had approved. So ATS&R is giving us their expert opinion, and ATS&R is, of course, one of the foremost school architectural firms in the state. They're giving us their expert opinion about where they think the market is going to be. And I do believe it's a very, in this case, conservative means we're actually trying to make sure that we have the dollars for the projects. If you choose to go forward, the last thing we would ever want is I got to look at these people in the grocery store and at church and things like that. We don't want to ever have to go back and say we have to reject bids because we hadn't asked for enough in the bonding process. Is that a fair summary, Mark?
That is, and I do want to clarify that that district you mentioned, that large district we're working with, we didn't reject bids. We were able to move forward with those bids. That did happen to be a large district, a large bond referendum where there's many projects, other ways to kind of make things up, or, you know. So, but a smaller project with those increases that you don't plan for can be a problem. But we track this every month, you know, so when we get closer, again, depending on what all happens, when we get closer, we're working with the team and we're designing these buildings, we know where we're at. And so you can do things, whether it be add alternates, deduct alternates to the project based on maybe certain materials or finishes, or maybe even just the size of the project, because we don't want to be in a position of being in a bid opening and getting caught off guard and saying, whoa, you know, we didn't know about this stuff. We try to be proactive and track these and make things, accommodations to address those things.
And again, I
But
think we're
yes.
just trying to do our due diligence to make sure you have the best information that we possibly have at the time. And as administrators, that's what we do. We make recommendations and decisions based upon the best data, you know, that we have at the time, and we want to make sure you have the best data at the time of you making your decision. So, in short, Mark is here to tell us that the project increases since March have gone up $2 million. And so, what you'll see in the next part, I'm going to offer people to ask Mark questions here. And then in the next part, you're going to see that the financial numbers that we're giving you to look at include that $38.81 million total project cost, just so that you understand. If you look at it, you say, wait, that was 36.895. We've updated those numbers again so you can have the best data to make the decisions that you may choose to make. So do people have questions? I'm sorry. Do people have questions for Mark at this time?
Board members? No.
You speak of the 18% for 1 year.
Yeah, yes.
Is the 5% the following year then based, going to later on top of the 18%, or will that 18% possibly?
So that 18%, we've increased our estimates at 18% to like today.
Right.
Okay, so that brings us to a new point, and then from there on, we're at 5%. So I'm not like 18% and then another 18%, but yeah, it takes it from, it brings it to a certain point, and then it's just another 5%.
But the 18% is going to stick.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. As a new base for the next
exactly,
inflation.
exactly.
Right. Thank you.
And that's kind of how we do this. Every time we get the new ENR index, it brings us to a new base. Whether it goes up or down, it's kind of a new base, and then we kind of project from there, kind of more based on the history, you know.
May I ask another question?
Yes, absolutely.
Is there a possibility with all the inflation, with all of the increased cost of the buildings of construction, at least regionally and maybe around the country, might there be a backlash where businesses and communities are going to say, I'm not going to do this? And as a result, there's some of the construction that was anticipated is going to back off, leaving a gap for somebody else.
Potentially.
How's your crystal ball?
Yeah, speak into our microphone so we can capture your...
I wish I could predict that, but that's...
Have you seen that as a possibility?
You know, I can't say that I've seen that.
I can't remember hearing.
Right, but and the ENR index, it goes up and it goes down and it goes up and it goes down, but it kind of makes about that 4%
The trend
line.
is always up.
The trend has always been up about 4% per year. And why things go up and down, I mean, I remember years ago, 15 years ago, there was the steel, right? There was There was a real shortage of steel or something. I don't remember why, and then, that was kind of came unexpectedly and prices were coming in high on steel, but this seems to be an overall across the board type inflation, not just a single product.
And Noel, I think that, I think there's, as Mark alluded to, I think, in my opinion, there's my analysis, I think there's probably at least 3 reasons why we've seen this inflation. I think one, Mark alluded to, it's a concept you are all very familiar with, which we have been talking about, the opportunities in the trades. We've talked about our programming and how we can prepare more students for the trades because there is a substantial labor shortage for skilled laborers. That is increasing the cost of projects, right? And so we know that that's one factor. The 2017 Atlantic hurricane season damage total, $282.16 billion. Now that was, there's an initial supply issue with that as those areas are rebuilding, and we heard about that last year, right? We knew that was going to be one of those things after they did all those totaling. And then also we have the uncertainty that we have at the federal level in terms of when markets have uncertainty around things like tariffs and some of those things that we know are being debated, and reasonable people can have different opinions on those. But regardless, when there's uncertainty like that at the federal level, what happens is suppliers and business folks and construction folks, they cover their costs because they are trying to foresee and anticipate what they are using their crystal ball for. Logic would reason that as the hurricane damage is repaired, that will, of course, that's a one-time event, you hope, right? The current season is upon us. But if we come back to some kind of normal hurricane season and those initial projects are taken care of, what consumerism and what capitalism would say is that the supply of those materials and laborers would go back up, right? And so thus trying to even out those costs. So I'm not an economist, though I'm licensed to teach it at the secondary level at high school. But I think those are factors that are beyond our control, right? What we're trying to do is we're looking at our current situation and saying, frankly, we're trying to say what is the worst case scenario that we can imagine, so that we are able to tell the public this is what we think we need to do this important work for kids, should you choose to move ahead.
Excellent. So other questions for Marquez at this juncture?
Question, is that 17% of that number, I mean, I know, is that municipal, public, or is that across the board in residential and other?
That's a great question. I don't know the specifics of the ENR index well enough to know that, but I could find out and let you know. I think I'd have to get back to Dr. Hellman on that. I'm not sure if it's construction across all construction types, or if it's specific to schools, municipal type. That's a good question. Yeah.
Great. We need to get that. We'll definitely share it with the board. But for now, we have our working number. Thanks to Mark for your diligence on that. I think it is really important that we start this discussion with being fully transparent with where we're at. So, eyes wide open. We knew that, things weren't going to get less expensive, but now we have, a definitive number around that to work with. So that's good work. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
So now we'll move forward with the
Financial numbers.
Financial numbers. And so there was a packet prepared by Ellers in your packet.
So I'm going to kick this off, and then Val is going to step in and help us do some explanation of capitalized interest, because as we look at, and one of the things you're going to see in the thought exchange just very quickly is, of course, as always, one of the things that the public is concerned about any public works project is the total cost to the taxpayer. Very reasonable concern. So we have anticipated that because we know we've heard that in the wake of last year's election that we had. The facilities action team, that was a piece that they were very concerned about, and made sure that we wanted to consider and think through that. And the thought exchange confirms those things that we have heard. So working with Ellers, our financial advisors, they have looked at our long-term debt, and they have looked at how we could use a strategy called capitalized interest, which would reduce the taxpayer increase. And we would basically, the term in the industry is we would wrap around the new debt around our existing debt. So Val is going to talk through what capitalized interest is, and she's going to walk through the three options that we have here, and the graphs are best to illustrate that.
Yep. So on page 2 of the packet from Ellers is their estimated sources and uses. And essentially what capitalized interest means is our estimated project cost is $38.81 million. If we're going to capitalize interest, we're going to bond for more than that and then use some of those bond proceeds to pay the interest in the first couple of years. Because 2 years from now we have some debt falling off, and so it allows us to stabilize the tax impact to the taxpayer. So that page 2 really shows the first option where we're not capitalizing interest. We would be bonding, 38.37. There's some specifics about that with, they're expecting a premium bond market and all those things, which I won't go into right now. But basically we'd be bonding 38.37, and we would earn some interest on that, and then I'll talk through the charts on the following page. If we capitalize, so option 2, if we did $1.9 million of capitalized interest, we would be bonding for $40.27 million. instead of the 38.37. So you can kind of see the increase there. And we'll talk through what that means. You can also see the bolded line on the bottom of that chart, net available for project costs. You can see they kind of keep it in that 38.81 range because that's what we're projecting currently that the projects will cost at the time that we bid them. And then the third option would be $2.6 million of capitalized interest and total bonding of $40,975,000. So that's just kind of high level, but I'm going to go through the charts, which I think will make more sense about why the three options and what the differences are between them. So the graphs I like best, if you go to page 4, there's a color chart with a bunch of bars on it. This is what it would look like our tax rate for the taxpayers. So one of the things that I like to keep in mind when we're talking through these things is when we're presenting this to the public, we are only required to provide them what their tax impact is in fiscal year 19. And so whether that's a large increase or it's flat, that's all we have to tell them. But what that looks like beyond that is also important for them because they are not interested in large swings, which we know. So this first chart is the no capitalized interest. You can see that in fiscal year 19, that tax rate, the blue bar would be the new debt that we would be adding. You can see how that kind of goes across. So they would have 2 years of a big bump. They would come back down to where they're at right now for 3 years, and then it would lower off when our debt for the middle school falls off in 2024. So you can see there's some pretty significant variations. And then on the last page, we'll also talk about what that means for their actual tax impact on an annual basis. So then if you go to the next one on page 6, this is if we did $1.9 million of capitalized interest. And basically what that means is that we're using that $1.9 million to pay most of the interest payments the first 2 years of the bond. So that's why there's just a small increase where it's, it's a little bit, but it's level for the 4 years, and then it comes down. So that at least is more level for the taxpayers. It's a very slight increase and not quite the jumping around like the no capitalized interest is. And then on page 8 is a little bit more, so the 2.6. That essentially pays almost all of the interest. You can see that the rate stays under that 20% tax rate. So the blue bar in fiscal 19 and 20 is very, very small. And then it, again, is pretty level and then falls off for 2024. So the last page is really the page you're probably most interested in, page 9. You can see the estimated bond issue. These are all 20-year bonds. And the estimated capitalized interest across each of the options. And if we look at a $250,000 home, which is just a little bit more than the average here in Northfield, the no capitalized interest option would be $128 annually. And the second option would be $54 annually, and the third option would be $27 annually. What I would recommend right now today, looking at these, would be option 3, because I think we heard loud and clear from the taxpayers that they would not support a significant increase, and this would be a way to honor that request and still bring forward the appropriate packages and needs that we have as a district. The other thing that I look at, back up on the top box there in the middle, it says estimated total tax levies over 20 years. So this is one thing that we got some feedback on in November of 2017, or with our last campaign, is what is the total cost to the taxpayers. So this is what the total cost is for the 3 options. So even adding additional $2.6 million to the bond to capitalize the interest and reduce the tax impact, if you look at the difference between 3 and 1, it's about $1.2 million over 20 years. So we're talking about $60,000 a year spread over our entire tax base to help support having a lower tax impact. That is my super high level overview. So do you have specific questions?
That was really, really good, because this is very complex, but I know board members will have comments and questions, and so we really kind of want to do let's just take a lot of time to digest what we just heard, which really what we're saying is, because we have this opportunity to do this, we are literally going to be able to tell our average homeowner in Northfield, in our Northfield Public School District, if we go forward with the elementary bond, that will cost them $27 a year.
Increase in the first year and then flattens out.
So it's really a significant decrease from where we would have thought that would have been. So a lot of questions, so we really want to spend our time working through that.
I just want to do like what I just did with our last group. I want to make sure I've got this in my head correctly. So what we're saying is that if we do option, let's say 3, of 2.6 million capitalized interest, we would be borrowing more, but using some of that borrowed amount to pay down our interest earlier in those first few years, hitting that hard.
Yes.
Which would result in a lower cost per taxpayer in the district. So we're borrowing more, but because we're structuring payments different, it would end up costing the average homeowner less in the long run. Than option 1 of not doing it at all.
Yes. The other thing that I will point out is if you look at the blue bars and compare the 3 charts.
Yes.
Option 3 you can see is, in that 12 to 13% range when you get out to where it's all blue. But if you go up to option 1, it's closer to 11%. So we're bonding more, but it spreads that out over a longer period of time. So the taxpayers in years 10 through 20 of the bond pay slightly more than they would had we not capitalized interest. Does that make sense?
Well, what I'm looking at is they all end at the same time. So we're using the same time frame.
Same time frame, but in years 10 through 20 roughly, the taxpayer will pay slightly more than they would if we did not do capitalized interest.
And what it does is it basically spreads it out over the term.
Right.
A little bit more.
Yeah.
It stabilizes it so we don't have a large drop off. So it is the same exact amount of period of time, but in the tails, toward the end of paying the bond off, the average homeowner would pay slightly more than we would if we didn't capitalize the interest, because it's spreading the payment out more evenly, I think is probably a good way to say it, over the 20-year period.
Okay, but then we don't get that big bump in the early years. So but it effectively still is saying we can borrow more and pay less for it.
Well, we're going to pay a little bit more in the long run, over the total term of the bond. We're going to pay more totally over the 20-year period. But the initial here and now, and next year and for the following years, it would be it'd be less than a modest increase at $27 for the first year.
Right.
I think that works out to a little bit more than $2 a month. And then that rate, the tax rate, which the tax rate does not always equate to what you pay as a homeowner, but the tax rate is a large representation for taxpayers, would then remain flat through 2024, and then taxpayers could see some tax relief at that point as the middle school project is paid off. And then from there on, they would pay a little bit of a higher rate than they would have had we not capitalized the interest, but the payoff is a lower payment in the early years.
Right. Right.
Well, and the other point of clarification is this works because of the size of the bond. So that's what's, sort of this coming together. This obviously was not, and the timing. So this obviously wasn't on the table during our last bond discussion because of the size of the bond. so it's the size of this.
The size of the bond, and we're 1 year closer to having a drop off of some of our debt.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Then the other point of clarification too is when you talk about the estimated total tax levy over 20 years, there is the potential, and we have seen that in the history of the district, that there would be refinancing available, which would directly go back to the taxpayers. So this is more or less worst case scenario.
Yep.
Because as a district, we have a strong history of having the ability of working with great people like Ellers of opportunities to refinance bonds when the market, we're able to do that. So that is really worst case.
Yeah.
And we're actually planning to refinance a small part of our debt this fall. It's not a substantial amount, but again, what we do is we look at any time when we can have some debt where we can refinance it to cost the taxpayer less over time. That's a good thing. And so we'll be doing some refinancing. It's a small one. But now over the last decade, what's your estimate of how much we've saved the taxpayers by refinancing?
$5.5 million.
So in the last decade, we have saved taxpayers $5.5 million in taxes by refinancing bonds at strategic points. So again, it goes to our long history of fiscal stewardship and really making sure we're keeping an eye on those markets. So again, it is the worst case scenario, but we've really listened to the public. People have very clearly told us we know there's some need, especially at the early learning in the elementary. We know that the high school was just too much because that was the biggest tax item on the November bond. But we also are listening to taxpayers and saying, is there a way to fund this in such a way that will limit the impact to me as a taxpayer? And if you look at all of those charts on that last page, page number 9, when you look at that, the difference in we often talk about residential home, but let's take a look at $1 million commercial industrial. No capitalized interest, that business would pay $1,047 more per year. And by doing the $2.6 million worth of capitalized interest, we could bring that down to a $219 increase for a business valued at $1 million. So it's not just the homeowner that would save. We also know there's some concern about business tax, right? And so it would really have an opportunity to substantially lower the business tax, which is a piece that we've just very clearly heard from the chamber and some other friends who believe in what we're doing, but they are also looking out for their folks. So I think it's listening to the public.
So I have several points of clarification. So one, I appreciated Ellers bringing this to us, and I think I really like the approach of thinking about this, and I like the approach of option 3 because of how it's going to stabilize the tax impact and listening to the voters about, we know what the needs are for our students, but how do we do that in a way? I could imagine that this could get, you could continue to do the capitalized interest so that it would look like 0. I'd be uncomfortable with that because this isn't the only levy. We're going for a bond, but we would still have our levy. We still are levying for the other pieces. So I think that being careful and mindful of, if we were to choose an option 3, and say a $250,000 home, it would increase your taxes. It would be about $27, but just being mindful. That's, I guess, one of the things I appreciate is using the capitalized interest, but acknowledging that that this is a nice point to be at. The other point of clarification is, I think that Ellers said that our bond rating, which is really important for us, in order to be able to continue to refund, like you were saying, we save our taxpayers $5 million, that we wouldn't be at risk by doing something like capitalized interest. We would still be able to, we can never predict our bond rating, but this isn't a lever that would say, oh shoot, now what did we do?
We're always happy to talk about our bond rating.
Yeah, because it's so pretty.
We just want to remind that there are only 3 school districts in the state that have a better bond rating than we do. And we've been told by financial advisors we will never be able to get to the AAA. We'll never be able to get to the AAA because of a number of factors surrounding the economics of our community. The 3 school districts that have that highest bond rating are often what we like to call the Fertile Crescent on the west side of the Twin Cities. But a AA plus bond rating, there's only one better that you can get. And so we're always now, it's not uncommon for districts who are AA plus to go back to a AA and then back to it, because there's a number of factors that bond folks take into account, including some things that are beyond our control. But we are very proud to have the highest bond rating other than just 3 districts in the state. And that will be a leverage for us in terms of this moving forward. And you're right, Ellers has told us that they're not too concerned about our bond rating going down because of this project, though they couldn't promise it, of course. Is that fair? Did I say that right now?
Yeah. Okay, great questions. Noel?
I have a question,
Yes.
and
Turn the microphone on.
I think I've
Was
thought
your
it
microphone on?
wasn't. I have a question, I think I've thought it through enough, but I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to answer. If I look at option 3, where it says the increase for the estimated project costs would be $27 for a $250,000 home. So if I go back to the chart, the previous page, option 3, does that mean if the voters decide to vote down the next proposed project also, if it is that number, that essentially the taxes would go down, all the blue would disappear.
Yes. Yes.
There would still be taxes,
Yes.
but the blue would disappear.
Correct.
So they would save themselves $27 for a $250,000 home per month.
Per year.
I'm sorry, per year. I spend more than that in a week, in a month on top.
We know about your Mountain Dew habit.
It's legendary.
Yes, the red is our existing debt and where the tax rates would be currently if we did nothing, or if we move forward and it's not approved.
Yeah. So the message, philosophical, whatever that word, you know what the word is.
Philosophically, yes.
So the message is $27 a month for $257,000.
A year.
$27 a year.
For 200, for the project, and a $250,000 home. Provides significant educational opportunities for the children of this district.
And when I get to thought exchange in a minute, you all saw the initial video that I did, and we did redo it just a little bit, as you recall. Our goal with that thought exchange video was to really get the projects themselves in that short 4.5-minute video. And one of the key things that comes through in the thought exchange is the public wants to know, how is this going to impact the education of students? Well, as we know, these projects are completely based in research. We know that what we know, and this is not some, educational think tank, but Art Rolnick and his team, former Federal Reserve Vice President, his research shows that early learning, high quality early learning, which if you remember, we have a 4-star parent aware program, it's the best rating you can get, which brings a lot of scholarship opportunities, a $16 to 1 return on your investment. I think that that's a little bit better than the stock market, if I'm right? Okay, that's a joke. These are the jokes, folks. So I think the key thing is that early learning, we know that when we can get every student who wants one a high quality preschool experience, which we would be doing through this project, we know that that has a substantial, it's not even close, and the research is decided. It's not like it's a point of contention anymore. We know the return on the investment to the community, to the state, and to most importantly the students themselves would really actually be beyond true measure if you think about it. And then continuing to make sure that we have some additional space at Bridgewater and Sibley. And one of the things you're going to see in Thought Exchange is people in the community absolutely understand that the current Greenville Park building structure is not conducive to K-5 learning. They know that. Now, as we know, there are many students who have gone through and done brilliantly at Greenville Park, but we also know even within the same family, there have been people who've had a great experience and a tough experience because of the way noise carries and things like that. The current Greenville Park building, we think, would be an outstanding early childhood center. Those students aren't there all day long. It provides some amenities that you would not have available in nearly any other early childhood center in the state. And it gives us a very high quality, not fancy, but a very high quality K-5 elementary building to match what we have at Sibley and Bridgewater. And the needed expansions, modest expansions at Sibley and Bridgewater would also bring a number of different rewards. And we will show that over the course of any information campaign so you choose to go forward. But I think the key thing is that for $27 a year for the first year and then maintaining it, it wouldn't go up another $27 in year 2. That's the purpose of showing the longer term debt chart, the rate, which is again not exactly what the homeowner would pay every year, but it's a reasonable approximation. We will get a tremendous amount of educational impact specifically based on research around early learning. So I think that what we have tried to do is, I've met with numerous people since last November. We've assembled a number of groups. We've had the facilities action team. We've asked their thought exchange. And so we really try to, and when it comes to the concerns, it's about the tax impact. And it's not necessarily about the long-term tax impact, right? It's about how does it affect me as a taxpayer right now. Without getting too into the details, by having that higher rate in the later years of the bond, it will allow more to spread that taxation over more people who might move here toward that later, more almost providing more tax impact to people who might use it toward the end of the bond, which we've also heard from people from time to time in various different ways. So we really think that this capitalized interest approach is responsible for the here and now and does not add enough long-term debt to where it is consequential.
Margaret. I'm also looking at this third option. I'm looking at hypothetically, let's say a bond were to pass for a new high school in 2024. This would be a good setup for
Yes.
that tax impact. Much better than ouch, ouch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we can't, of course, promise anything for that for future boards, you know, but your hypothetical construct is correct. You could use a similar option when the rest of the debt were to fall off in 2024. Well, what's really important is that the voters get to choose on that again. You know, that's another time, it's another place, and circumstances could be completely different. But the strategy would potentially, we could not use the strategy last year because we are 1 year further away from the Bridgewater debt falling off. And the size of the bond did not allow us to take advantage of the strategy.
Excellent points and excellent questions. Other questions? Everyone's seeming to, it's a lot to absorb in terms of how the numbers work. So, you know, we'll have other opportunities to ask more questions, of course, but this was a really excellent overview. Thank you, Val. Thank you, Dr. Hillman. Thanks for the excellent questions. Then we'll move on to thought exchanges.
I'm going to briefly show...
reminder, there was a recap in your table file.
And I know folks did not expect to get this information tonight because we had told you it was going to be tight to get the information by the deadline today. But what you do have in front of you is you do have a high-level overview, and I won't read that to you because I know that you can all look at that and engage with it. I will highlight a few things here that I think are important. Over the 10-day period, just remember all parents in the district were invited twice via email, and the district did take feedback from people that we heard during last fall's informational campaign, and we mailed a postcard to every voter in the district. A little more than 13,000 postcards went out, and every single voter in the district received a postcard with the directions and a QR code to be able to go on and take advantage of giving us their feedback. We had 397 people participate over the 10-day period. It's really not comparable to previous thought exchange because this is a different approach. In the old days, they had one segment where you shared thoughts, then there was a little timeout, and then everybody came back and then starred. This was a consolidated approach, which worked okay for this particular piece. I have some thoughts on how that might work for us moving forward, but I'll spare you those right now. 397 people participated, 422 thoughts, 13,453 stars. Now, one of the pieces that I want to show you as we go into some of the demographics, one of our frustrations that we have had with thought exchange is the difficulty of getting people to participate who do not have children. What I want to point out to you here is that 24% of the respondents were people who said I had no students in the district. Talking with Kaylee Metcalf, who you've met before virtually, she says in her time at Thought Exchanges is by far the most number of people who do not have students in the district who have participated in an exchange. So I think that what that says is that the postcard did work. 78 people who don't have children in the school district, which means they would not have gotten an email from us, responded. Now, when we look at that over 13,000 postcards, I know that that's a small percentage, but it's by far the most feedback that we have gotten in some time. You'll see how this breaks out. If you remember, we really worked hard on making sure we had the demographic part right. In terms of I have an elementary student, I have a middle school student, I have a high school student, I have children that attend multiple schools in the district, or I'm a district resident with children attending a school other than Northfield School. So if you remember, the board constructed this demographic question at a work session, and it worked out very well because we got some really good feedback. What you'll see in the handout that you got are what are called top thoughts. And what you'll see in a couple of different areas, there's We have a piece that is the hot topic number 1. And what this particular one will show some different pieces. And if when you log into the system, you'll be able to even get a little bit further dig into the data. But what they also do with hot topics is they look at folks who may be rated one thought highly and another thought lowly, and then they use, or lower, excuse me, and then they use an algorithm which tries to match people up to give you some idea of what did people who thought about this in a positive way, how did they compare to other folks. And so what you'll see is in a group A, we've got people who are just, let's do this. The elementary school projects will help address the achievement gap. I support this 100%. On the other hand, concerns about, again, just as I said, not that opposed to the project, but how will the project directly benefit students and how will that be measured? And I think we have a very compelling story to share with the community on that, right? This is in your packet. Talking to people about how they're going to improve our students' performance, how do the changes benefit kids specifically. And as you know, we relish the opportunity to share that with the community. Last year we tried to do it 51 different times, if you recall. So we are ready to do that should you choose to move ahead in the next couple of months. You'll also see in another area, we have folks who clearly know that Greenville Park needs a new facility. You see, if you look on that next page, page 3 of the report now, Noel.
Yes, thank you.
Group of folks who are looking at Greenville Park needing a new facility, building a new GVP as soon as possible, believing the Greenville Park's not set up efficiently for K-5 education. You'll also see another group of folks who are concerned about the tax impact. And so again, when we think about the discussion that we just had, right, this confirms what we've heard from taxpayers, and I think it behooves us to really listen to that and to consider those capitalized interest options. Now, this is just a very high-level report. You'll see some concerns about tax. And when you see tax impact, it isn't all. So I think sometimes people think tax impact and they think of it in a negative fashion. It isn't at all. It's simply an objective discussion about how taxes impact people. But what you're going to see is you're going to see a couple of different pieces. In this particular thought that 33 people started a rate of 3.5 stars per person. Retired, elderly, fixed income, lower income, upper income, working class kids. Why should kids come last? They are the future. So in this case, people are talking about the prioritization of tax impact. Then the other question is, what is the individual tax implications for this proposal? And we didn't have all the numbers when we did the video, so we couldn't provide those in a way that would be transparent for folks. You'll see Greenville Park was another piece that has come up on page 4. When you look at page 5, again, you look at other areas of conversation that were active around funding and budget. People grateful for previous generations who paid my and my kids' education. It's my responsibility to do the same. Highly rated across that area. Question reasonable about how money raised to be repay the bonds. And of course, we know that we do that through taxation and the approaches that we've shared here tonight. And then following up on what we saw in the previous thought exchange, the general conversation that we had this spring, you'll see that safety and security continues to be a concern, and wanting to make sure that our elementary schools have the most current facilities to do that. And there is, to a head nod to it, there are still a number of people who are disappointed that we aren't moving forward with the high school. And I think we need to acknowledge that there are a substantive amount of people who did vote for the project last year because they thought the high school was valuable. In our follow-up conversations, we know that that was the deal breaker. And so as a public entity, we need to do our best to listen to folks and bring forward what we think is the next prioritized version. But I do appreciate people not letting the high school drop off that thought process. So that's the overview. And when you get it, if you look into the charts, you can get into, you've got this bar chart here, and these are all themes. And as you click on the chart, you now look at how those things impact. You can look at every single one of these. You can get these various thought processes, and you are able to look at how those impact, and you see the distribution of stars. Really fascinating stuff. When we get back over to the part where we look at the top thoughts area, what you'll be able to do is you can actually do a little data slice and dice, which is fascinating, right? Because here we're seeing all of the thoughts and questions, but now we're actually also, which again, how heartening is this, that quality education for the children of our community is vital. This is our future and their future. The top rated thought, number 1 of 402, right? So we know that the community values education. That's never been in question. But we're also able to do some slicing and dicing of this by saying, well, let's take a look at this by demographic. So when we look at people who identified themselves as not having any students in school, we're able to see that when we look at their thoughts and concerns, a lot of it is about tax impact, right? So what this is allowing us to do, first of all, it gives you a little bit more information as you finalize your thought process and for us to move forward. In addition, it is helping us anticipate for any informational campaign. We have people's thoughts ahead of time, so I think we're going to be able to weave a better story to get to people's informational needs more quickly, because we are able to anticipate more of the questions that are coming up and that are in the hearts and minds of people in the community. So I'm thrilled with the fact that we had almost 400 people participate. I'm over the moon in the fact that we had 78 people, who participated by getting a postcard in the mail, and that's a strategy we will continue to use. It cost us $2,600 maybe total to send in the postage. The printing of the postcards is very inexpensive, but if you think about that kind of investment to get feedback from the community and to give them heads up and to redirect them to web resources, that is a very positive way to do it. There's a lot of information here. I can't go there, as you know, even Thought Exchange, when they come on, they can't go through it all. You have all been emailed a login to your school district account. You can log in and you can look at this if there are questions that you have for me. I will be, of course, I've had about 3 hours with this, and I'm a little bit of a kid in the candy store with this kind of data. It's pretty exciting. So we've been looking through it for the last couple of hours, and we'll be looking through it over the next week or so. If you have questions, please contact me. But our goal was, could we get some additional perspective from the community? And what I like about this is it triangulates the data that we have, right? We had a set of things we heard from people in all of our individual conversations after the election last November. We congregated the 30-member facilities action planning team to take a look at that and say, okay, those things were not a shock to any of us, right? A lot of those things pointed to some similar things that we had heard. And the third leg of this stool is the Thought Exchange, which again, gives us a little bit more insight and a little bit more confirmation of those thoughts. So I hope that that's substantial enough for this evening. I know we have other items on the agenda yet, but I just did want to make sure that we had spent about 10 or 12 minutes on that.
So board members have any other questions? So what I think where we're at now is just a really complete picture and a very comprehensive set of information around the tax impact and where our community is thinking in terms of the facilities action team. Dr. Hillman has just done a marvelous job really of pulling, the what's next when we left the last referendum being unsuccessful, and now coming to this place, again, understanding where community is from the work that the facilities action team did, Thought Exchange, now a really complete picture around what this project that we saw was really the next step that made the most sense to address in the facilities action, our master facilities plan, as well as current costs for that. So our board members, now we talked last board meeting about really being able to, at this point, sort of get some consensus if board members are willing to share at this juncture where they feel comfortable in terms of next steps and directing the administration towards the next steps, as now we have a pretty comprehensive set of information around what the next step will entail for the community.
So you're asking a question?
Yes, so basically what I'm saying is where as a board do we want to move going forward on this, and would we, how would we, if we need to direct the district to begin preparing for the August 13th vote, where we would have to take a formal vote on moving forward with a bond referendum on the November 18th ballot?
Can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Since I'm the outlier, maybe
Yes.
I'll go first. I've done a lot of thinking since our last meeting, and I really appreciate the conversation we had last time. And while I am still a strong supporter of the high school, I can see that it's not time for the high school now. So I would like to say I'm on board with the elementary school project and the option 3 for financing, which would minimize the tax impact. That would be how I would want to go forward at this time.
Excellent, thank you. Other board members?
No.
I agree with Amy. He really expressed my thoughts very clearly.
Excellent. Perfect.
Same.
Okay, good.
Yes, I agree too. In some ways with the, I hate the fact that we've had this 18% year to year, but in some ways it seems like in terms of us, I was sort of slicing and dicing about what we should do, and it seems like, okay, we need to just go for this package, and I think I really appreciate Ellers looking at what we could do in terms of minimizing the impact and stabilizing the tax, and so I feel really comfortable with option 3.
Thank you. Okay, so I feel the same. I think it's an opportunity for us to move forward to, we remain committed to the master facilities plan. And we're, we have the opportunity. I think we have an incredibly comprehensive information that Dr. Hillman just did a really, really good job of pulling together for us. I think we can feel comfortable moving forward. And we've had a lot of opportunity to think about how we're moving forward, and I think it's, I agree. I think we can move forward with this. Amy.
Can I just ask where Jeff is?
Yeah, I find the construction cost thing going up kind of disturbing, but I mean, the longer you wait to do anything, that isn't probably going away. I mean, I think that's kind of a blur, but again, if you're talking about planning, you get something approved, you get that we talked about before, you get, 18 months to plan and 18 months to probably build. So, that's changing, but that's always going to be a moving target. So, something needs to be done on that. I think the best way to finance that, with the Greenvale with the improvements is a much easier sell and much more timely and a much bigger need than the high school, proved to be. And, that can is kicked down the road a little bit, but this is something we need to ask for and move forward. So.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. So then I think what I'm hearing, we do have consensus. So we now give Dr. Hillman and the administrators the opportunity now, and so then in August 13th board meeting, we would actually vote on the ballot language.
Necessary actions that you would need to put on the ballot. We have been doing, as you know, some of the legwork all along and trying just to be ready for this because of the tighter time frame that we have. So Val and I have already done quite a bit of work. Jim Colseth has been involved, a number of people looking at this. So I feel very good where we're at. Mark Hayes from ATS&R has helped us with the review and comment, which I'm going to ask for your permission to submit here in just a few minutes. So I think we're actually quite on track. I feel very good about the time frame. And then, of course, the next big thing will be making sure that we schedule early and often opportunities for the community to tour and to do presentations and answer informal questions, things like that. So we will start getting those processes going. And, of course, no decision has been made yet. The official decision doesn't come until August 13th. So you have an opportunity to think and ask questions, and if at that time there's something that you're not comfortable with, you're not committed to anything. This just directs us to get some of the work going, and we will do that with pleasure. So
excellent. And I just lastly want to thank board members for the great discussion we've had. It's been really, really good. The work sessions, the time and effort everybody has put into doing this, the community members who stepped up, either whether it was thought exchange or being a part of the facilities action team. It's just been really, really excellent, and I just appreciate everybody's participation and efforts and really good conversation, and it's always great. We have so many great questions, and we have great discussion, and we help each other kind of come to consensus. So I think we can feel proud of where we're at right now, and now we go out and we ask the community, and as Dr. Hillman always says, the ultimate form of democracy, they have the opportunity to give their positive approval or to not. So. And
the voters are always right.
That's right.
Regardless of what decision is made.
So we hope we understood what they had to say, and now we'll move forward and go to our voters again in November 18th. So, okay, good stuff. Thank you, everyone. So now we are actually through our items for discussion and report, and we can move on to approval of consent grouping. As a reminder, there were just a couple of personnel items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Okay, I just wanted to just make a comment, and I know it did not go unnoticed by board members that there was over $18,000 donated by the Northfield Booster Club to cover scholarships for our all of our students in co-curricular activities, which we know is at an all-time high participation at Northfield High School, and part of why Joe Lear sees the student connectedness, school connectedness types of results that he sees, and so we know that's a huge part of it, but $18,000 is a significant amount of money, and so we just really have to thank them publicly for that. So, all right, so we have is there anyone, okay, so no one wanted to pull anything. Do we have a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Jeff, is there a second? Second by Ellen. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we'll move on to items for individual action. We have a few tonight, the first being the approval of separation agreement. Is there a motion to approve the proposed separation agreement? Moved by Margaret. Is there a second? Second by Amy. Any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our second item for individual action is a long-term facilities maintenance and 10-year plan. This does need to be approved and submitted to the Department of Education by July 31st, so that is why we're doing it this evening. I will ask for a motion in a second, and then Jim Kulseth is here if anyone has any questions. So is there a motion to approve the long-term facilities maintenance revenue and 10-year plan? Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Ellen. Questions or comments for Jim Kulseth?
Very thorough. Thank you.
Good job.
Excellent. All right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We do have the annual resolution that we do regarding Christopher Columbus Day. And we're just doing that motion again for its not to be a holiday so that we actually can have a board meeting on that particular day. Not that we're not saying it's a holiday, but this is just procedural so that we are able to have a board meeting on that holiday. So is there a motion to approve that resolution? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Margaret. This is a resolution, so it requires a roll call vote.
Gerwitz.
Aye.
Stratmore.
Aye.
Cornell.
Aye.
Colangelo.
Aye.
Iverson.
Aye.
Pritchard.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. So again, back to our discussion, we have some procedural issues to move forward with the possible fall bond referendum. So is there a motion to approve authorizing administration to submit the review and comment document as required by the Minnesota Department of Education for the elementary projects associated with the master facilities plan? Moved by Margaret, or I'm sorry, Amy. Is there a second? Second by Margaret. Okay, questions or comments around the review and comment document?
And again, we didn't have the document in your packet because we are working with ATS&R to finalize that. Most of it we did last year, but we actually hear different things whether we have to have you authorize it. We would rather just have you authorize it, and then we will submit the document as we have in the past.
Okay, excellent. And so no questions or comments. We have a motion and a second, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that takes care of items for individual action. Dr. Hillman, we have 3 items for information. The first being a first reading of the Wellness Policy 533, and that document was provided in the past, and the changes were highlighted in red.
Yes, in first reading, and again, if you remember, we did a lot of intellectual heavy lifting on this policy last year. We've been working over the last several years to having our policy aligned with the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act. And as you know, that was passed some time ago, and its implementation was phased in over a period of time. Last year was the time where we were required to adopt policy. We had a good cross-section of folks who worked on the policy, including people from the community, students, at least one student, and then professional staff. At the end of the first year, what we have looked at is there's just one minor modification, and it's on page 4 of the policy. It's highlighted in red there. And really what we want to be able to provide is it's this balance of eliminating a lot of the kind of sugary and those kinds of treats on a regular basis using food as a reward. That's really the intent of a chunk of this policy. But we have realized and we know that we need to provide some reasonable exceptions for some special occasions at each building. And so as we've worked through this year, what we learned from and when we said, well, okay, what do we need to do next? We just want to highlight in the policy itself that there will be 2 special event exemptions per year allowed at the middle school and the high school and at the Area Learning Center per year. And then there are 2 exceptions per grade level per year at each elementary building. So the whole building at the elementary school doesn't have to have the same day as an exception. Grade 1 could choose something different than grade 3. This is some of the feedback that we received that we felt we could do within the guidelines of the law. So we're simply trying to formalize what we have been doing here. You'll also notice that the exceptions will be documented and we will be providing the Director of Finance to determine if an expense is allowable under the wellness policy guidelines. So Val will be the gatekeeper in terms of this. And so it's just a check and a balance. Again, we want to be able to celebrate those really special opportunities, but we also know that with things like childhood obesity and some other concerns that we have, the wellness policy was intent on making sure that we comply with federal law in terms of the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act. These exceptions are things that we understand are acceptable under the law. So first reading, we'll ask you to go ahead and approve this the next time. Also, we're putting something that the board doesn't approve as part of policy is the procedures that administrators put together. We are going to put together an example matrix, if you will. Director of Child Nutrition Stephanie Strumming is working on that, and that's a procedural document that she will do to accompany this particular policy on the website.
Excellent, thank you. So any initial questions or comments? Okay, so again, we'll approve this at our August 13th board meeting. So if board members have questions between now and then, we'll get to Dr. Hillman with that. The next item for information is filing for school board. We did speak about that at our last board meeting, but official filing is July 31st through August 14th in the district office. It's filed actually with Anita in the district office. And the filing fee is $2, which is the filing fee and must be paid prior to 5:00 p.m. on August 14th, 2018. So again, the filing for school board is July 31st through August 14th, 2018. Okay, and the last item for information, the National Merit Reception. Excellent that we have it so early to put on our calendars. Held on Tuesday, November 13th at 6 p.m. in the Northfield High School Media Center, which we held last year. Was a great venue. And just as a reminder, that Monday is Veterans Day, so our board meeting is that Tuesday, November 13th. So the reception is held just prior to our school board, which is great. So thanks for getting that date on everyone's calendar. Getting that date for us so we can get it on our calendars. It's really great to have it that early. So future meetings, again, we only have one meeting in the month of July, a little summer break. So we'll reconvene on Monday, August 13th, and then again, Monday, August 27th for regular school board meetings in the month of August. September is Monday, September 10th. Those meetings are all at 7 p.m. in the Northfield High School Media Center. I just wanted to make special note of, and welcome to Ann Kopes, who is joining us as the new Northfield News education reporter. She's here this evening for her first meeting, and I think important to recognize that Ann is a Northfield High School alumni, class of 2014, and a recent graduate of the University of St. Thomas. So we're excited to have you reporting on school board news and school district news. So thank you. Welcome. Yes.
I would add that meetings usually aren't this long. So.
Yeah. Excellent, Jeff. Thank you. We had a lot of information to cover, and we only meet once this month. So you're right.
But we were efficient.
We were efficient. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Okay.
Good job, Dave.
Yeah.
Good questions.